Hello, everyone. Hi, it's time for the Jeff Gerstmann Show. I'm here. It's Tuesday. My name is Jeff Gerstmann, and I'm here to host another week of happenings in the video game industry. There's been a grip of things going on. TennoCon happened. Evo happened. So, some announcements in the world's most important genres of fighting games and Warframe games, frame games, I guess. Is that because there's what Soul Frame is the other thing that they're working on. They did show some things on Soul Frame. I did not look at any of the Soul Frame stuff, but I reinstalled Warframe. This is my TennoCon tradition, I think, at this point. The last 2 or 3 years is the Warframe people have their annual event where they get everybody together and say, here's what's happening in Warframe. And then a couple of days after that, I hear that and go, oh, yeah, Warframe. And then I reinstall Warframe and play some more Warframe. This year was no exception. This year it was already kind of it was almost predestined to happen because of the amount of the First Descendant. As I have played through the bulk of that game's story, and every step of the way, that game took a lot of cues from Warframe in terms of researching items and whatever else. I was like, man, I should just reinstall Warframe and mess around with Warframe. So I did a few things. I recommend this. If you've played a good amount of Warframe on the PC and you're in possession of consoles, they turned on they did this at some point over the last year or whatever it was. They turned on cross progression. And so if you like fun, and by fun, I mean achievements and trophies, and you have played a lot of the PC version of Warframe, you should link up your console accounts and then go download the console versions of Warframe and just open them after you've linked the accounts and all of that other stuff. Because if you just want to sit back and watch achievements ring up for like 4 or 5 minutes, it's a good time. So I now have like another 600 achievement points in Warframe or whatever the hell it is. Warframe is cool. It's weird, man. Like the thing about the big robot ninja suits that you are jumping and running around in is that they all feel very lightweight. And by that, I mean, when they jump into the air and land, they oftentimes don't feel like they're landing with any kind of oomph. And that is, as you're doing your bullet jumps and wall runs and all the other things you do in Warframe from a mobility standpoint, all of that stuff is radical. Once you get it down, because it's a lot of, it can be like finicky stuff. I'm playing with a controller because I just am. And so one of the moves is like you start a knee slide with like the left bumper, and then you jump, and you'll do like a spinning jump forward, and you can aim that up to jump up, and it's awkward, but whatever, you get used to it. But like there are elements of that game that you are kind of hitting a couple of buttons at the same time that also feel kind of strange. But like there's just a lack of weight to those characters, I think, and that's always been there. It's something that I noticed coming out of it. Playing a few hours of it the other night, after a year or more of not playing Warframe. Warframe just gets weirder and weirder and weirder every time I come back to it. This time, maybe a little less so. They announced stuff like they And some of that stuff went into the game immediately, but the stuff that went into the game immediately is kind of more of an ad for the thing they're doing in the next update, which they're calling Warframe 1999, which is a throwback. You will go back to 1999 in the Warframe universe, where they only had proto frames I guess. I didn't go look at this stuff. I just I read up on it and kind of ingested it that way. And it's, yes, Sigma Factor in the chat is right. They are kind of doing a vapor, like there's a dead mall in the game right now. Like it is this kind of vague vaporwave-ish sort of. You just look at it and go like, I don't know. This is there's a dead mall on top of a dead mall by the point that you have decided to do an update in this aesthetic. It's really weird. I don't know. It's just like why is this happening now of all things? Like I don't, well, whatever. I don't know. I don't think I'm some cutting edge, like I was in the ground floor of Vaporwave and let me tell you, it's dead as doornails. But I feel like most of the people who were in that position would tell you exactly that. They would have told you that 9 months after Vaporwave happened, though. So I don't know. It's so whatever. I feel like my position on utilizing those specific aesthetics all these years later is pretty well established. In that you just look old when you do that. But okay. But yes, there is. You can go visit a dead mall right now. You can. It is this rundown fucking mall, and it's all this alien language all over the shops, and so it's just like pictures of cheeseburgers with alien language written around it, and you're like, yeah, all right, that's cool, whatever. And so I went and did that and went and visited. There's a guy that's going to be there for another 6 days selling stuff. And I went and I bought some Prime Warframes or something from... I had 13 of the extremely rare currency somehow. And so I spent 10 of that on something, on a couple of suits, which I guess are characters. If we really want to break it down, I mean, they're effectively characters. They're not just suits for your character. Though I guess your brain lives inside the... All right. The other thing I did is I started the quest line involving the Drifter, this is spoilers for Warframe if you have not played it over the last 4 or 5 years, but this is all stuff that's been in the game for a long time, and it's the thing when people joke about the what has happened in Warframe recently. This is kind of the thing they're usually talking about, where all of a sudden there's a big long cutscene that has a human in it. And then after about 4 minutes of this human being murdered over and over again, it cuts, like it zooms in on the guy's face, and then a character creator appears. And you're like, what the fuck is happening? And so that's not even you, because you're in a... Yeah, you're a brain in a... Yeah, there's layers to this fucking shit. But anyway, at some point they created this open world area. And a bulk of this area you are playing as the Drifter, which is your created character. And then from there you're going into another sub-level, and in there you play as the Warframes, but it was only letting me play as the 3 starter Warframes, not the actual catalog of frames that I have unlocked. It went back to like the initial onboarding through, like, you want to be Excalibur or the shock one, or what do you want to do? And so it's weird because I have 30 levels, and yes, because of the way they've organized the game now, like that could be one of the first things you do in the game. Which I did. I actually played because I had to create a new account on Xbox in order to have an account to link so that I could get all those achievements we were talking about. I ended up playing like 20 minutes of the beginning of Warframe, and it's very different than it was. Not that I remember it that clearly, because Warframe is extremely old at this point, but I don't remember doing any of that stuff, and it feels like they've done a better job at building like the onboarding, like brand new player stuff for maybe what the game is now. Anyway, this area you go to with the Drifter is like almost a run. Well, I don't know if it's like a run-based roguelike light thing almost, because at the end of every encounter you are getting some kind of boost or boon that you're selecting from a list, and then if you quit and come back, all that shit is gone, and you have to, you'll get more of those. And so there's kind of a weird impermanence to that sort of stuff. And the things outside of the when you were not in the Warframe, when you were just a dude, and over the years, apparently I have acquired a ton of cosmetics for the dude. And so, which you could make a lady as well. Lady dudes are also acceptable in the world of Warframe. And so you can equip a bunch of stuff on your guy. And so he's got wings that look like he pre-ordered fucking Diablo 3. He's got all kinds of fucking funky stuff. So I equipped all that stuff and he looks like a big weird dumbass. But like the bulk of that is really, the bulk of what I've done so far in that quest line is a lot of sword play, which the game has always had melee weapons and whatever else. But like, this is more like, hey, these guys are gonna, you know, like you have a pistol, but they're not going to, they're not going to have it with the pistol. You need to get up there and cut these fuckers, and so it's a weird tutorial that could potentially be hours, years into your experience with the game, where they're like, hey, by the way, here's how you block and parry an attack, and if you do this, you can, you know, if you parry it right, you can do a finisher. Like it's these very basic melee mechanics that I don't think feel very good. It feels like something that they bolted on to a game that had been around for a very long time, that had very basic swordplay before. It's just, I don't know, it doesn't feel great. But also you get a horse that you can summon you get a horse that can fly. You get a flying horse, and you kind of just like running and jumping around and flying around this area and getting in these fights, and then going into the subcon. It is not called subcon. It's the under fort. I forget what the fuck lore words they used. But you are occasionally dipping into this under area to do shit as a Warframe, and then you are back out as the dude with the swords. Yes, Tim Kelpus here. Undercroft. Sometimes you go to the Undercroft, and when you're in the Undercroft, you are in a Warframe. But then when you leave the Undercroft, you're no longer in the Warframe. You're just a dude in, you know, whatever cosmetics you have equipped on your guy. And so Warframe 1999 is the thing that this stuff I'm talking about is years old at this point. Or at least a year old. I think it's like, isn't it like 2 or 3? Anyway. Warframe 1999 has this whole kind of separate story, and there's a romance storyline that will presume that seems to take place via an instant messenger sort of thing. And so there's a whole story they're telling here about, you know, this period in time with earlier versions of the Warframes. And having read all of that stuff and kind of like digested what they were doing with Warframe 1999, and then immediately seeing all the Drifter stuff for the first time, which was the stuff that came into the game, I guess, last year. It was this realization hit me of like, oh man, this game has been around for so long, and people have bought so many cosmetics for the main game that they had to make a whole separate type of game and put it inside of Warframe, because now they can sell you cosmetics for an entirely different character. And for the Drifter, your guy in this mode that came out a year ago, there's a lot of cosmetics and stuff you can buy. And so when they, you know, reading through that and then in conjunction with Warframe 1999, you're like, oh, okay, here's another reason to not use the entire decades worth of gear you've been acquiring, because in Warframe 1999, you've kind of got to start fresh in the past with this other stuff and proto Warframes, and eventually over time, perhaps you'll get the stuff. And so they're going to give you this stuff for free, but I assume at some point they will go like, and by the way, if you'd like to customize your character even further, you can. Like they're not going to lock you out of it or anything. Like you can still get into the area with all the baseline stuff, but it is a separate baseline than the rest of the game, if that makes any sense. And so I assume that this is a way for them to, you know, and whatever, the game's like a decade old or something, so it's good that they're mixing it up and trying new things. I'm not necessarily saying that this is like a bad evil move or whatever like that, but it feels like they're like, oh man, we've got to find new ways to separate players from their gear because they like their gear, because they've been using it for a very long time. And, you know, we can only put out so many new Warframes into the main game without having to go and make a zillion new things to do in that main game where people have level 30 gear, everything is max level. We have to give people reasons to start over. And so this Warframe 1999 thing feels like them just kind of, again, much like with the Duviri or whatever the Drifter stuff is, it's them ginning up ways to bolt another thing onto their game that is largely incompatible with all the gear you have. And so you get to kind of start fresh on a thing, which is fun and exciting if done right. But also it gives them a new opportunity to be like, if you, I mean, you know, like they're out there with like some new song from some boy band that exists in their world. And so presumably you're like, oh, well, what if I could buy t-shirts for this boy band to put on my Warframe 1999 character? And then what if there was a tattered version of that I could wear on my, anyway. So like the whole thing. so that's, yeah, I mean, you know, and they did this with the Railjack stuff. They did this with a few different things over the years, but I think it just sunk in on me after reading the 1999 stuff and looking at the stuff they added last year and realizing like, oh, this is how they're creating like another, because, you know, when I go back into Warframe now, I have no idea what I'm looking at. I've got like 3 max level frames and a bunch of max level rifles and swords and stuff that I've used over the years. And then I have a ton of like stuff that I've never used, or stuff that's like, you know, it's level 0, it's level 2, it's stuff like that, you know, pistols and you know, different knives or whatever the hell. And so there's that temptation to like, oh, well, I'm going to change characters to a different frame because I want to level up another frame, and I'm going to use this pistol instead of the one I like, because I want to level up this gun also because I might as well because I have it. I really like this sword, but I guess I'll use, you know, these dual swords or this hammer or whatever because it's level 0 and I should probably level up more stuff. Because if I'm not leveling up, then why am I playing? Or I guess like why am I you know, because you eventually hit max level, like really easy. Like you know, it's not difficult to hit max level with your gear and with your frames. And the frames, again, if you're not familiar with Warframe, the frame is the character you're playing as. It's the weird robot ninja thing. They come with separate abilities. So like the one I liked playing as was an ice, sort of like the First Descendant. The one I liked the most was the one that shot a bunch of ice power, and I leveled that one up to the maximum, and then was like, okay, well, I can go do these missions, but like I don't know why I'm doing these missions because I'm not getting anything out of it. I'm getting more like loot to craft, you know, like theoretically I'm getting crafting materials to craft other items, but I like the items I have. Like, I guess I could level up a bunch and change the polarity of my Warframe and try to do, you know, like what there's systems upon systems upon systems. But the game is clearly meant for you to like level a thing up and then be like, okay, now let's do this instead. And now let's change to this. And now let's change to this. So I have like at this point, after all these years, I don't know, 20 different Warframes, 20 different frames. And 5 of them I've leveled up, but the rest are all like level 1 or 5, you know, like I never really messed with. And so, yeah, it instead of like this kind of like, hey, you've got a character and you're leveling up that character for the entire decade, it becomes more about like, well, I hit max level in this thing. What am I going to level up next? And doing that to kind of continually rank up or whatever. And I don't know. And I'm level 6 like there's an account level on top of that, and so I'm the first level of gold, I guess. I hit the second level with my faction. Like I don't know when, but when I loaded the game up after a year of not playing it, it said, "Hey man, you're at level 2." I'm like, "Oh, okay, great. Awesome. Sick. But yeah, I don't know. The Warframe continues to be, I don't know, whatever. Like, it's not unmanageable. Like, there is, years ago, it did not have a clear kind of, here are the quests you're doing, and here's the next step in this quest. It was like you were just looking at a world, like a universe, or like a map of the solar system, and going like, I don't know, do we want to go to Neptune, or where do you want to go? Which planet you want to go to today? You're like, I don't know, which one am I supposed to go to? Okay. Earth? Is Earth an option? Is it? No? Okay, well, is it? So whatever. They have done a lot of work to that game. And now like they have things like clear through lines of like, oh, here's the next step in this quest. Here's an actual quest log. Here's a list of available quests. Here's prerequisites you need to complete before you can even start to do these quests. And so they've done a better job of like kind of guiding you through the game a little bit if you need that. Yeah, I don't know. It plays well for what it is. I think it's the character movement and all that stuff feels flimsy. Like they're meant to be ninjas, right? And so they're meant to be these kind of fast moving, lightweight kind of cyber ninja things. But they feel like they lack weight. Again, that's sort of the other. Yeah. Smebble Bear is talking about things you can do when you hit max level, and it involves doing something called farming endo. Well, now that farming endo is legal, maybe we can get into. I don't know. No? All right. I don't know if I'll play any more Warframe. I don't know if I'll play any more Warframe, but I did leave it installed, but like I spent most of my time doing that kind of introductory quest with the Drifter and this whole new thing that I hadn't seen before, and I don't like it that much. It's kind of fucking boring. So once I kind of got the hang of that stuff, I was like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. How do I get back to the Warframe part of Warframe? And like looking around for an exit, and then the game crashed, and I was able to load back in and see like, okay, I'm back in my ship. I can do other stuff. I wasn't like trapped. I thought that I was trapped. Like, oh, you have to finish the part with this idiot with the beard you made. You got to finish this part before you get to go back to do the real thing. So yeah, I don't know, man. Warframe. It's out there. The First Descendant is a fucking mess. I haven't played much of that over the last week or so, but I fiddled with it and got to basically the second to last area, I guess. The progression in the First Descendant is a disaster. It's a really, there are big roadblocks in it that are really crazy. So if you watched the video, yes, I did unlock the Poison Lady. I had to run one mission 6 times in a row to get the drop in order to craft the Poison Lady. I had to run that mission over and over again until the thing dropped. It was like a 20% drop rate, and I'm just there doing it over and over again. And occasionally other players would come along, and sometimes they were doing the same thing I was doing, and sometimes they were just doing the mission for the first time as part of their normal progression. And it was very silly to just be like running back and forth like, okay, I got to run back to the start, activate this mission again, and then I got to shoot these like 12 guys, and then there's a boss that I can kill in like one hit, and anyone coming upon this mission while I'm doing it is stoked because I'm doing all the fucking work. The game the First Descendant has such a problem with people like not playing the game that they had to put a login message up that says let's build a respectful gaming community, no AFK farming. And it's like I don't know, I feel like that's on you as the developers of the game to either prevent that from happening or maybe create a different set of incentives that don't incentivize people to just sit there and fucking AFK a mission over and over again. Like, You have these missions in the game that have like 6% drop rates, so no one wants to fucking do that. No one wants to run that mission 100 times and hope for the fucking best. Like, you've created a game that inspires people to look for ways to not fucking play it. This is on you. It's really stupid. So anyway, in the First Descendant, you hit these you go to an area and you do a bunch of missions, and it's fucking whatever, right? Like I said, the whole game is basically Destiny patrols of like, you activate a beacon in the field and it says like, you need to do this thing, and it's like one of like 7 things. No matter what area you're in or whatever, it's always the same fucking shit. Like, you should go here and kill all these guys. You need to stand here and defend this circle and keep them from walking into the circle. Oh wait, this time they're in the circle and you need to get in there and kill them in their circle. Now, this one, the most annoying of which, we're going to make a bunch of balls spawn, and you've got 3 minutes to collect 50 of them, and it's a lot of, like, airborne platforming. Great, huh? No. Anyway. You'll finish an area or 2 areas or whatever, and then everything will kind of stop, and it'll be like, there's a fucking big monster. Before we do anything else, we have got to beat this big monster. And so the game has these kind of separate boss fights where you go fight large creatures. And they're neat. They're neat encounters for sure. But oftentimes by the time you get to the next one of these encounters, like, and they'll unlock as you progress through the story, basically. But it kind of says like, okay, so a little backstory here. I hate that we're talking about this, but we have to. I have to get this out. The level cap in the First Descendant is 40, but gear keeps scaling up after that. So I'm like level 40, but all my gear is level like 64. And you'll find and the monsters continue to scale up to these higher levels as well, which at that point, just let people keep leveling. Like, it's not, why have a cap? Or why have the cap there, I guess, if you're just going to keep having content where those numbers keep going up. It's really weird. So I unlocked a boss fight. It's like level 66 or something like that. None of the areas I can visit drop gear that is that level. And so you're always going into these fights for the first time ever so slightly under-leveled. And this one is, which one is this? I believe it's the Pyromaniac. He looks like the first guy, or he looks like one of the other guys you fight, except he shoots fire, basically. And these guys will have different elemental resistances, and you know, it recommends like, hey, you should have this level of resistance for this element before you go into this fight, which is not a super easy thing to equip, unless you've been hoarding gear at your level that just so happens to have the right rolls on it to have that type of resistance. There's like things you can do to get some resistance, but not usually the level that they're recommending, unless you're like very deliberately speccing like half of your loadout in that direction, which is not super easy to do, and you have a limited amount of inventory space with which to do so. And so that's nonsense. So anyway, you join this fight, and it match makes you up with 3 other players, and you go in there, and the 4 of you go to fight this fight. The fight has a time limit on it, and also a death limit. So you have like 10 minutes to win the fight, but also if your party, anyone, not just you, but if anyone in your party dies 3 times, meaning if there are 3 deaths across your entire party, rather, not one person dying 3 times, then you lose, and you have to start over. And so you join this fight, and you know, depending on, like, at this point, I've fought the fight enough times to where I'm not getting dropped. I feel like I'm doing good damage. It's a fire guy. I'm the ice lady. Like, I'm doing quality damage to where I'm pulling way too much aggro, to be honest. But like, we're not getting it done. Whether it's because I'm underleveled, or the other characters and the other players in the fight are the wrong characters, or they're not leveled, or, you know, like whatever is happening, like, we're either running out of time without having killed the guy, and he still has like half his fucking bar left, or someone's dying, or one time someone just stood there and didn't even fight, and so it was like, well, this is fucking pointless. We should just quit. We should just quit at this point because, you know, one of the players is not even doing it. And you cannot progress with the story until you beat this fight. But the fight is something you cannot solo. And so you're reliant on just like lucking into a good group, or if you know other players that are playing the First Descendant, which is a hilarious concept. You just kind of have to keep rolling the dice on this fight over and over again until you finally beat it. And the last 2 or 3 of these boss fights that I've had to do have been like that, where it's like the first time I jump in, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, okay, like what is I'm getting downed a lot or whatever. But by like the 6th time, I know what the attacks look like. I know what to fucking dodge. I know where the fucking points to do damage are, whatever. Like I'm getting it done. But other players might not be in that same bucket. And there's kind of nothing you can do at that point other than keep fucking banging your head against it until you just get through it. And it's fucking bad. It's a bad way to structure the game. And so like I'm at one of those fights, and if I were to relaunch that game and play more of it, the only meaningful thing I could do, unless I want to go level up my other characters, because I have other characters that are not at the level cap, and so you can always go do that. And that's what you see a lot of low-level players in high-level content in that game as well, because they're taking one of their other characters and trying to level it up. Because you can still equip high-level gear. Like, you don't have to equip level-appropriate gear. Like, if your second character is, like, level 9, you can still have your level 60 gear equipped on them. But they're still going to be weaker because there are stats and benefits that come with just the core leveling of 1 to 40. So your level 9 character is going to have way less shield and less health than your max level character with the same gear on. It's just fucking weird, man. And I spent too much time with this game, and I will probably go back to it and try to beat. Like, at this point, I'm so close to actually just fucking beating the storyline stuff that I kind of just want to see it through for some disgusting reason. But boy, the more I play that game, the less I like it. On top of that, like, it's not a good, like, they made a lot of really questionable, again, for a game where you look at it and you go, oh, these developers clearly sat down and looked at a lot of Destiny, and they looked at a lot of Warframe, and they maybe even looked at a little bit of PSO along the way. Like, they had a lot of blueprints and templates to, like, cull from. And a lot of the grind and monetization stuff is very similar to Warframe's. But like the way they built the progression in that game is highly questionable. Like, it's really like, you just look at it and go like, man, you really fucked this part up. You really fucked this part up. To the point where, again, they because of whether it's the drop rates and like, oh, if I had this high level weapon, ultimate weapon, then maybe I would do better in this fight or something like that. Well, it's like, okay, you need to craft 4 separate items for that thing, and each one of those items requires 4 different sets of materials. So, and some of those drop rates are in the 6 to 10% range. So I hope you want to go run a mission over and over again until you luck out and get that fucking drop, dumbass. And I am a dumbass. I did that a couple of times. But I don't know. Warframe's neat. I don't think it's necessarily any, like, Warframe chose a few different paths in terms of player progression and storyline progression in ways that I think actually make it way more confusing than the First Descendant is, I guess I would say. At least in the First Descendant, you know what you're doing next. In Warframe, sometimes that's really not clear, even with all the work they've done to their quest system over the years. I would lay the same criticism at Destiny 2 as well, even though Destiny 2 did rework its quest system in ways where you're like, oh, I can pull the left trigger and it'll pop out a list of quests. Like, okay, well, there's like 5 quests here. Which one's the new one? Like, they don't always do a good job with that stuff. So basically, I think this whole genre, and, they're a little bit different because Destiny is not technically not technically free to play. But like, yeah, I don't know. All of this stuff could be a lot better. And the things the things that I find that I have the biggest complaints about, are things that are not necessarily dependent on like the way they are monetizing the game. You know, like these aren't walls that I can spend my way past. So it's an interesting thing of like, you know, because the temptation would be to like, oh, well, this is where they want me to spend money, so clearly they're going to do that. But it's not even that really, and it's just a weird. It's a weird place to be. Rapid Chronicles in the chat asks, do you think you will check out Soulframe? The Deviri paradox is very much like a prototype or early proof of concept for Soulframe, and that's the part where you play as the Drifter and do the sword combat. So I'll tell you this. If Soulframe is a lot like the Duviri paradox in Warframe, I don't want to play it. I don't think that stuff has been compelling at all. Like past the like first 5 minutes of like, oh, okay, well, oh, I've got a flying horse, okay, but like once that sort of settled into now go do this, I don't like any of that. I don't think the things they've done to melee combat in that part of the game are fun to engage with at all. Regular mainline Warframe is fun, but like the stuff they've done where it's like, here's this way more melee focused thing, like I think that stuff is not super well made. It feels very bolted on. It does not feel like a good system. It just feels clunky and like the combat does not feel good. And in a game where that's the thing you're doing, I don't think that stuff's much fun at all. So if Soulframe is going to be like that, no thank you. What else came out? Clickolding came out. Have you played Clickolding yet? Have you tried this? It's like $3 or two. It's like $2 something on Steam. It's a half hour. It's 45 minutes. It's a very tight experience. It's a very tight experience. And it's just a short little narrative thing about you playing someone who went to a hotel room to click a tally counter for someone for $14,000, and that guy sits in his chair and almost ejaculates for basically the entire time. It's hot stuff. It's from Strange Scaffold. You know, the studio that taught your kids how to gamble last year. They made this as well. It's from the El Paso Elsewhere developer. They're working on I Am Your Beast as well. It is just this fucking creepy little narrative piece that does not overstay its welcome in terms of gameplay, but it will stick with you for a good long time to come afterwards. And I think you should check it out. You can watch someone stream it. I don't know. Watching someone stream it is actually like another level of sickness back from the actual play of it. Like there is a weird, disgusting meta layer of you being a person watching someone play it. That you could perhaps, maybe you'd be really into that. You know. It's a fun little thing. Again, it's very creepy. Like it's not some horror game. But Clickolding. There's no H in there. It's not click holding. You have to click for the Clickold, who wants to give you $14,000 just to watch you click. And it's dirty. It doesn't make you feel strong or clean. It makes you feel a type of way. Especially when you're back by the door and you can barely see him, but you know he's there, and you know he can hear you clicking. Yeah, it's heavy. You should take a look at it. You should take a look at it. It's exciting. NES World Championships came out on Switch. This was, they showed this back at what the direct or whatever, right? This feels like a slightly more fully realized version of NES Remix, which that came out on the 3DS. And in this package, they have taken, it's like 7 NES games. It's Mario Brothers, it's Super Mario Brothers, Metroid, Super Mario Brothers 2, Ice Climber. It's a short list of early game of mostly early games on the platform. Kid Icarus. And they've taken these games and they've broken them up into these bite-sized, like, speed run style chunks. Kirby. So there's one late model game in there in the form of Kirby. And so the first one of those is the most basic thing imaginable. It's you starting Super Mario Brothers at the very first level, and it says, go get the mushroom. That's it. There's nothing changed about it. As soon as you touch the mushroom, the game stops. It tells you how long you took to do it, and it gives you a letter grade based on how you did. And then you can try it again to see if you can do it faster. And it will play your best run in a so basically it's like your window, and then the your best run window is right next to it. And so you can kind of see how you're doing, which is, makes sense for some of the longer challenges. They're not all going to be 4.5 seconds. Because it'll be like, hey, go beat Kraid in Metroid as fast as you possibly can, and we're going to start you at the beginning of this room, and you got to get over here and do it. Yes, Bryn posted the list in the chat. It's Balloon Fight, Donkey Kong, Excite Bike, Ice Climber, Kid Icarus, Kirby's Adventure, Metroid, Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers 2, Super Mario Brothers 3, Super Mario Brothers The Lost Levels, The Legend of Zelda, and The Adventure of Link. And in the main game, you just you complete these tasks and you earn coins that you can use to unlock more tasks. And so you can choose whatever you unlock next in what game you unlock it in. So if you're like, well, whatever, I want to play all these Mario 1 challenges, you can do that. I find this to be the fucking exact opposite of how I want to engage with these games. I think this is like a miserable package. And I felt the exact same way about NES Remix. It's just a missed opportunity in terms of the framework and structure of what you're doing and how you're doing it. It's fucking whatever. Like, hey, here's The Legend of Zelda. How fast can you walk in the door on the first screen and collect the wooden sword? You shaved off 1/10 of a second there. Congratulations. Now you're and they've put online leaderboards, and now they have weekly challenges. Like these are the changes they've made over NES Remix, where now there's, a bit more of like, do you want to like get online and, if you're the fastest of these 6 people to do it, you continue head. And so they've like found different ways to take these bite-sized challenges and present them to you, whether it's like, here's the weekly list of challenges that we're tracking on a leaderboard this week, and maybe you'll win, and you can win fun pins for doing so, and whatever. I think it's fucking boring as hell. I think it's a really shitty way to, like, it's partially because of the games. It's partially because of just how much downtime there is in between these things. Where you're like, okay, now I'm going to go back to the menu. Now I'm going to pick the next challenge. Which one do I want to do? Is it this one? Is it this one? I guess I'll do this one. And like, you spend more time in the menus than you do doing the challenges. It's like a repackaging of this that was just like, I don't want to say everything has to be 40% of the things that make WarioWare great and keep it moving and put it into this? Or what if they had just made it fucking WarioWare? That would be great. That would be a much like crazier, like, oh, like it would add a sense of like surprise to it. Maybe that's what it needs, because it's the opposite of that. It's okay, I'm going to stare at this menu. I'm going to hit this button. It's going to say, you need to get the mushroom as fast as you possibly can. And I'm going to go, okay. And then I'm going to hit the button and it's going to go 3, 2, 1, go. And then I'm going to get the mushroom. If I die, it just it rewinds a little bit, but your run keeps going. So you're going to get a bad time, but you can still do that as a full run. I don't want to do this. I have zero interest in like having these games chopped up in this specific way. Of like, here's all these micro speed runs that you can do. Like it's yeah. I just there are some interesting little things here because you're unlocking these little pins, and some of the pins you look at it and go like, oh, what a little retro fun little thing they did here. I see why they would have done this or whatever. This should have been a free thing that with your Nintendo Switch Online subscription. This should not be a thing that they're charging $40 for. It's a joke at that price point. Because I think it is a bad time. If they had made this way more online focused and made it a thing you get with that package, then maybe that could be something. But also if they added more surprise to it and you know, panache, presentational fun and excitement, and maybe put a little joy into it instead of just like the pins are really the only place that have any kind of joy. And even then you're just looking at a thing and like, it's Ice Climber. Yeah. All right. It's not even as good as the trophies. At least in fucking Smash Brothers, you could go look at the trophies and get like some fun detail on them or whatever. Right. This doesn't even really have that. So yeah, it's, I think it sucks. I think it's like the exact, again, like in a lot of ways, it's the exact opposite of how I want to play these games and how I want these games. Like, you know, there are ways to maybe chop these up, but I think especially when they were calling it NES Remix back on the 3DS, you're like, oh, Remix. Oh, they're going to do a bunch of fun, you know, crazy stuff and be like, oh, why is Link inside of Mario Brothers? What's going on? What? Like, you know, there was nothing. It was just like, here, man, fucking run to the right and jump. Oh, you win. Think you can do it faster? You get more coins for it. Like, yeah, I'm good. I got an A+. I don't need to get I don't care. Like if you had a bunch of lunatic friends and you were, you know, all leaderboard scumbags, then maybe you could get way into it, I guess. But that's a very, you know, like I'm trying to envision a world where this game works, and it really is. It would be in that kind of the same way the Trials games work best. If you have or Trackmania single player, you know, if you've got friends that are also leaderboard weirdos and you're being leaderboard weirdos together, there's probably a little bit of fun to be had there. But the actual act of playing and controlling this game, I think, is fucking terrible. It's just not. I don't want to do this. Of the ways you could have chopped up and done things to these classic video games, like you've wrung all the fun out of those original games and turned them all into these mini chores. It's not cool. I wish it was. This is one I went into like going, man, I hope I'm wrong about this, because every single second of that video looked like it was NES Remix all over again. And it is, my understanding is that it is the same developers that did those games, did this, and you play it and you're like, yep, this is just there's a kernel of a good idea here, and every little bit of the way it was executed is like the least interesting way to do it. So I'm bummed, but also I guess I would say I kind of saw that coming to a certain extent. I knew it was gonna, you know, I'm not trying to fucking brag about it or whatever, but it's just like, man, come on. The last game I played that I guess would be worth talking about here is SVC Chaos. SNK versus Capcom, the Neo Geo Classic? I mean, it's a landmark moment for sure. Is it a great video game? Who cares? It's fucking cool. It's ridiculous. This is Capcom versus SNK became much more famous because those are great fucking fighting games. SVC Chaos, which is SNK's take on the crossover, not nearly as good, but really interesting, and I love the art in it. Like, especially the way they drew Guile, the way they drew some of those characters in the kind of the SNK style, I think is fucking rad. Anyway, that was a kind of surprise release over the weekend as the EVO fighting game tournament was happening. They put that out. It is out on PC. It came out on PC as they were announcing that. I believe by the time you are hearing my voice now, I believe it is also out on Switch and PlayStation 4. If not today, then like tomorrow, but it's like it is sometime this week. I bought this game when it originally came out for $300, and so I'm of the mind that them charging $20 for it is kind of a steal. But I think if we break that down a little bit further and don't use my sick fucking decades old fucking math problem, it's kind of pricey. But whatever, it's got rollback netcode, and you can go play it and you can fight people in it legally, which is fun. They are unlocked. I guess all of the characters are in it and unlocked, which people would have to use hacked versions of ROMs to do that these days, and everything else. So it's not my favorite SNK fighting game, I guess is what I would say about it. It is a fascinating game from a very interesting moment in time. And I'm happy to own that cartridge for the Neo Geo because it is such a weird thing, and it's a game that gets completely forgotten about because of how great, because of how amazing games like Capcom versus SNK 2 were. If I were ranking SNK and Capcom fighting game crossovers, I would probably put the Neo Geo Pocket Color version of SNK versus Capcom ahead of the actual Neo Geo SNK versus Capcom, because that game's fucking rad. But it's cool that this exists. It's awesome. Like, any sign of SNK and Capcom working together, like we got some good, we've had some good movement on that front lately, right? Where now we have SNK's game coming back out here. Capcom is working to release all of these Marvel games again. And so there's never been a better time to hope for more games along these lines, I guess, is what I would say. Why don't we get into the news and we'll elaborate a little bit. I'm going to push this button and see if the problem fixed itself. It did. Why? Who knows why the news music played in stereo, even though before the show, all of my system audio was only coming out of the left channel. Ha ha! Whatever, man. The producer of Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics says that he has big dreams for more crossover series in the future. This is according to Eurogamer. Though I guess the original discussion came from Dexerto. I don't know that I've ever said that word out loud. Dexerto. Anyway. Shuhei Matsumoto had some quotes about the future of the franchise, which if you are looking forward to more games in the Marvel vs. Capcom series, this is kind of exactly what you want to hear. The development team at Capcom has big dreams. Maybe there's an opportunity for a new Marvel vs. Capcom game. Maybe there is an opportunity for a new Capcom-based SNK game. Eurogamer goes on to say, while he admitted he doesn't know that it will happen, in the short term, the team can, quote, at least reintroduce these past legacy games to a new audience, to people who may not have the opportunity to play it because it might not be out on modern or current platforms. What we can at least do now is show that, hey, these series exist. We love these games. We hope that you do too. And maybe in the future, if people get to familiarize themselves with these series, then there may be future opportunities to make bigger games. Also said that Capcom has been talking with Marvel for years about making this happen. Weird that it would take years to do this, but I guess, who knows how far apart they were on money or whatever. But he says Marvel was also on board. Because of that, it's kind of like the stars aligned. The timing was great, and now we're actually able to bring it to life. We're all very excited. And some of the inspiration about doing this was that Marvel took notice of community-based tournaments at places like EVO. And so as a result, they're going to, they're putting out this Marvel collection of all these fighting games. And that's fantastic that these things are coming back. It's also fantastic that he has included SNK in this list. Because when you have someone from Capcom, I don't care who it is, if you have anyone from Capcom using words like maybe there's an opportunity for a new Capcom-based SNK game, that's the most hope there's been ever. I cannot remember the last time anyone in a development capacity at Capcom said anything about that out loud. So I would love, and if they went this same exact route with it, because obviously now SVC Chaos is coming back out to more modern platforms with rollback netcode and all this stuff, I would absolutely love to see Capcom versus SNK get the same treatment as this Marvel collection and see those games come back out again. It would be cool to see Tatsunoko versus Capcom back out in some capacity as well, but that's probably a harder rights issue to navigate than any of this other stuff. But I don't know. This guy who is producing the collection is saying, hey, there's a lot of things that the team wants to do, and we have a lot of love for Ultimate Marvel versus Capcom 3. The question, he was specifically asked, do you think UMVC3 could get a re-release with rollback netcode? There's a lot we're looking forward to and big dreams, and now it's a matter of timing and seeing what we can do one step at a time, which that's a very, I feel like that's a very sober and honest response. Because that's, we'll see is basically as good as you can get until business dudes sit down at a table and try to hash it out. I think current SNK is would probably be very interested in doing something like that. So I don't know that they would necessarily be a huge roadblock. When you get involved with Disney and Marvel and all that stuff, like that famously happened to, was it 3? It was Infinite, right? It was more Infinite than 3 that had to deal with it, right? The like, oh, well, we don't want you to use any of these X-Men characters because we want everyone to forget that they exist because they're not owned by, or the movie rights are split up and blah, blah, blah. As well as, just the like, hey, we want all these characters to look, on brand for the movie versions and all this other shit. Yeah, I guess 3 happened before Disney bought Marvel, right? Yeah. But Infinite is, yeah. Do people like, I don't have a good, I don't remember people really like hating on Infinite when it first came out, but like, I feel like a lot of the discussion around it got pretty negative over the years. Whereas at least UMVC3 kind of hangs on a little bit here and there. It's no 2, right? But what is? Speaking of Capcom, VideoGamesChronicle.com has summed up some of their financial news and notes, and there's just one little tidbit in here that I found interesting that is also seems to be the part that they found interesting. During the 2023 financial year, Capcom announced that 90.1% of its sales were for digital titles, And it forecasts that that number will reach over 93% during the current fiscal year. But they did go on to say, given that a significant number of end users demand physical games, we do not expect to eliminate physical products. And so this is a weird thing where they are not looking to not do physical versions of games, but the numbers are going to keep speaking louder and louder on that front. And I think we're going to end up in a, this is probably not a bold claim, right? But it feels like physical games are going to end up being more and more of the boutique industry as time goes on. Where, specifically, like if you look at like Alan Wake 2, like where it seemed like it was always clear to me, and maybe that's because I basically heard this pretty directly, but like even before that, it seemed like, oh, Alan Wake 2, they're doing a physical, it's digital only. And you look at that and go like, okay, well, that gives them more time to work on the game before their release date. They don't have to go gold as early. They don't have to work on that plus patches. Like, that makes sense to have a smoother release for something that, they want to get out the door cleanly. And for something that's kind of leading on PC to a certain extent as well. And then now, a year later or whatever it is, they're like, hey, by the way, we're totally going to do a physical collector's edition of this thing, and you can buy it for $100 or whatever the hell they end up charging for it, because it comes with, dance moves. It comes with a list of how to do the dance, or a record. I don't know, a record with the song on it. It comes with something. I don't know what actually the Alan Wake 2 physical things are coming with. I'm sure that they've said something about what their deluxe collector's edition thing is going to be, but I bet that this continues to become the things kind of head more and more in this direction. I think you'll probably have like some of this stuff is going to be determined by the specific franchises and games involved, right? Like Capcom, we're talking about Capcom specifically, but like that game they just put out is digital only, right? Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess, which I installed but have not played. Like that I think is digital everywhere, not just on PC, which is 100% digital these days. And that people seem to like PC gaming. I guess the difference there is that you can always just literally take the files and copy them to a different directory on a hard drive, and at least feel like you're storing the files somewhere. Whereas on a console, that's maybe more reliant on the stores staying live and everything else. But it's a funny, it's a bit of a paradox, I guess I would say, right? Is you've got a lot of very dedicated players. Well, it's got to be different players, right? That say that they really care about physical releases and all this other stuff, but then you've got a lot of other people that are just like, man, the PC is the way to go. And the PC has been effectively digital only for like 20 years. With rare exceptions for the types of games that get sold in a Walmart, which is what I was getting at about, different franchises having physical, a bigger physical footprint than others. Like when they sell copies of The Sims at Walmart on a disc, they know what they're doing. They know why they're doing it. They have a perfectly good reason to do it. And I think on consoles, we could end up in a similar situation where just the number of games that clear the bar to get a physical release will just continue to shrink. Like college football should get a physical release. Like that game is big and mainstream enough. It sounds like that they have sold millions of copies, even of the $100 version of that game that, people had to get to play the game early. But like, yeah, the player base for that being as big and as mainstream as it is, they are perhaps going to not be as technically minded. They are going to understand the idea of like, well, I used to go buy an Xbox 360 or a PlayStation 3 and this disc and put this disc in this thing. That's what I'm looking for. I'm going to go buy a PlayStation 5 and I'm going to go buy a disc to put in it so that I can play the college football, Yes, and Cannon shot in the chest says, with that line of logic, Call of Duty should still get a physical release. Yes, exactly. yes, Call of Duty should still get a physical release. Games of that, Grand Theft Auto should get a physical release for sure. But the catch, of course, is that, that disc, what is actually on that disc? A piece of paper that says, connect it to the internet. A disc that when you put it in, it says, this is a great looking title screen. Push X to connect to the internet and download the fucking game. And whatever else. It'd be nice if they did more than that, but reasons like that are, I think, why when people try to have this fight about physical games and everything else, it's hard for me to kind of get it up for that conflict because of just what is on most of those discs. And so in some sick way, if we ended up with this more Alan Wake 2 like model of like, hey, a year later you're going to get this on a disc, that'll be after all the patches came out. So the likelihood of you getting something that might run well offline in a case where it's not a server driven game and blah, 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 like maybe that's the way to go. And the people that want to have a nice archival copy of something that they can play after the bombs drop and the internet is, EMP'd out of existence, but you've been keeping your PlayStation in a Faraday cage because you're ahead of them. I get it. And yeah, man, that's probably the way to do it. Get the Steelbox version so it will survive in our post-apocalyptic world. Pre-order now to avoid nuclear disappointment. Last week we talked about Microsoft changing up Game Pass. They are raising the price. Just a quick recap here. I can't do a full recap because it'll take an hour to fucking sift through all the stuff they did again, and I just don't have the stomach for it. They're raising price on the main version of Game Pass. They are reformulating some of the tiers in some ways and generally raising the price. They will now have an existing tier that will not get you day one games. Which has been the entire thing that Game Pass has been kind of... that's its platform. It's been running on the platform of hey, day one games. They are now going to offer a tier that doesn't have that for people that don't want day one games, I guess. I don't know. So, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission here in the United States, that still feels like they want to get their shots in at the Microsoft and Activision merger, despite it already being closed. They're like, hey man, no, we're not done yet. They came out and said, hey, this is what we were talking about when we said we had concerns about this, that you would degrade service, that you would do this and you would do that. This is what we were talking about. Basically, let's see here. Microsoft has kind of responded to that, but the FTC basically, they filed something saying that you're degrading service and this is a thing you said you would not do as a part of this. You lied in court. Let's basically potentially ramping back up to them trying to crack into it and being like, what the fuck are you doing? So Microsoft has kind of hit back a little bit. Their quote that they gave to Eurogamer is, "It is wrong to call this a degraded version of the discontinued Game Pass for console offering. That discontinued product did not offer multiplayer functionality, which had to be purchased separately for an additional $9.99 a month, making the total cost $21 a month. While Game Pass Ultimate's price will increase from $16.99 to $19.99, the service will offer more value through many new games available day and date. Among them is the upcoming release of Call of Duty, which has never before been available on a subscription day and date." The FTC barely mentioned subscription at trial, instead focusing on the theory that Microsoft would withhold Call of Duty from Sony's console. The district court correctly rejected that theory, which is now further eroded by Microsoft and Sony's 10-year agreement to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation a contract Sony was thrilled to enter, is the quote. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like, Microsoft has basically hit back and said, like, no, like, basically Microsoft's thing all along is, hey, since you originally said all this shit about the deal, the EU made us really reformulate a lot of the deal, and so even your old arguments are absolute fucking bullshit, and you should go fuck yourself and die. I'm editorializing on that last part. I don't know that that's an exact quote. But now the FTC, yes, they filed with the Court of Appeals to kind of say, hey, this is inconsistent with what you said. Product aggregation, removing the most valuable games from Microsoft's new service, combined with price increases for existing users, is exactly the sort of consumer harm from the merger the FTC has alleged. Microsoft's price increases and product degradation, combined with reduced investments in output and product quality via employee layoffs, are hallmarks of a firm exercising market power post-merger. This is interesting. When I think about Microsoft's market power, in a world where they're just kind of getting fucking trounced in the console space. And it's hard to describe the Xbox as a great example of market power. But in a world where they do have the only subscription service quite like this, and Sony doesn't really offer the same thing, if you are narrowing your focus to really hone in on that subscription space, then that is market power. We'll see. We're about to start having all this Call of Duty stuff come to pass. Come to Game Pass, that is. Available day one for Ultimate. And so we'll see what this ends up doing. I don't necessarily think that this is like, it's not November or whatever is not going to roll around and suddenly Sony's going to be like, I don't know, we can't give away a PlayStation 5. We're fucking packing them in with tanks of fucking gas at this point. We just got to get these things off the shelves, but no one's buying them because everyone's just playing it on Game Pass. Everyone's just playing video games on Game Pass now. Call of Duty really did, like, Call of Duty's a big deal. It will have some impact along the way, but it is way too soon to, I think, tell what that impact is going to be. Maybe a better indicator. Anyway, point being, I don't think Microsoft has cornered the market on fucking anything. And their control of Call of Duty will certainly be used to their benefit, and it's the thing that has allowed them to feel like they could get away with restructuring Game Pass with this tiered system that they're working towards. Like, that's the catalyst for all of this, really. But trying to make a claim that Microsoft is in a dominant position or that they are a market leader, especially if you include Nintendo in that mix, which, Microsoft is third of three. But in a future where, and this was the worry that a lot of these, the market authority in the UK had, and the FTC to a certain extent, it is like, hey, this subscription space is really nascent, and we want to prevent early establishment of a monopoly in this space, and we're worried that this might do just that. I don't really... Yeah, it's hard for me to see a world where that is something that we see the effects of this year. The thing I'll say is, if you want to see what the market effects of this are, if you want to see what the market effect of Microsoft controlling Call of Duty is on the console gaming space, we have to wait until those new consoles. We have to wait for people to have to make a decision again and see which decision they make. And if you're Microsoft, this is the moment you're waiting for, because this is where you could theoretically, if you got a lot of other ducks in a row, and that's a tall ask out of Microsoft these days, to actually have shit lined up and like correct, that's when you do it, right? You say, hey, you're going to go out and buy a new console anyway, because these ones are old and busted. You've got to get the brand new Xbox, or you could buy a PlayStation 6. Which one are you going to choose? If you buy this one, we'll throw in a year of Game Pass with the purchase of the console, and that'll let you play the brand new Call of Duty for $0 additional dollars. Can they sway people at that point? That's the actual question. When they're back in the market, ready to spend hundreds of dollars on a new console, is this something that Microsoft can use to sway people towards Xbox? I would think so. Or just cloud subscriptions or whatever, right? But assuming we're going to get on this merry-go-round at least one more time and fucking put out big expensive boxes for televisions, then that is going to be their best moment to capitalize on what Game Pass is and what it has over the competition. Right now, this many years in, the idea of someone looking at their PlayStation 5 and going like, well, I'm going to fucking throw this thing into the fucking street and hit it with hammers for a viral TikTok video because I'll get more value out of it that way than I will by playing Call of Duty on it. That's for sure. I got to go buy an Xbox. Like, no. They're not going to go sell their PS5 used and to go buy an Xbox Series X just for the $70 of Call of Duty for the next 2 or 3 years, like $140, $210, of those games, right? So it will be when new consoles exist. That's the time. If Microsoft can get all of their fucking actual shit together and fucking have a cogent and attractive proposition for those consumers, that's when they can actually use this stuff to their benefit. Assuming that Call of Duty is still a very attractive franchise in 2 to 3 years and they don't fuck it up and accidentally flush it down the toilet. Whoops. Stranger things have happened, right? Maybe Conquered comes out and is a huge seller and Sony doesn't even care about Call of Duty anymore because they're like, we've got Concord. I don't think that that's probably going to happen. But hey. In other Microsoft news here, there is a big, long editorial from Jez Corden on Windows Central kind of talking about the future of Game Pass. And in there, he kind of says, hey, I've heard a few things about what they're going to do next. One of the things he says, he's anecdotally, I've been told in conversation with Microsoft figures at events like Summer Game Fest, which, all right, okay. All right, that the, quote, vast majority of Xbox Game Pass users are already on Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. I think that's almost certainly the case. I think that makes a lot of sense. And it will stay that way if that's going to be where the first party games live. But basically he is also saying that, that, and these are just plans and these, who knows at the end of the day. Plans change, pal. But what he is putting forth here is that as a part of the future of Game Pass, that they may even add more tiers, such as, and some of these I think are very sensible, and some of these I think are probably very experimental. But having a cloud-only version of the Game Pass service, it's like, hey, here's a subscription to the service where you only can you don't get these benefits on PC or on console, but you can always play streaming. Like, yeah, okay. But I guess the thing there is that my question there is I would look at that as something that has to be cheaper because it's worse. But it's probably something that costs Microsoft more money than if you were to go buy a console over time, right? But in conjunction with Amazon these Fire Sticks now having Xbox Game Pass support, having a renewed push for the cloud gaming stuff makes some sense. Getting that rolled out onto every service that can support it is a must at this point. Like, you should do that. It should be anything with a screen and an internet connection that you can Bluetooth a controller to should be able to run Game Pass. That's it. Unless business reasons get in the way, right? Unless, it's like, well, technically you're describing the PlayStation Portal and Sony's not going to allow that. But, within reason, any of these phones, any of these stream set-top boxes, any of this shit that Microsoft can get its thing onto, they should. And if that includes a Nintendo Switch, they should do that too if they can get away with it. And that's a much harder, different business conversation that, maybe is unlikely, but like they should do that. If they can do that, they should do that. But like, it's I'm just not that interested in any of the cloud stuff other than in this kind of theoretical world where, and not, well, I guess it's not theoretical. Like I have run into very casual fans of video games who are not interested in spending $500 on a console, but they want to play Red Dead or they want to play, like there's college football could potentially be a really good use case for that as well. Like all these people that just went out and spent $500 on a PlayStation and another $100 on a copy of college football. What if instead you could say, hey, what if instead you gave us $70? We'll give you a Fire Stick and a controller. I think that was a sale price. I don't think that that's the going rate for it. It's probably a little bit more than that. And you can play college football right now if you have subscribed to the EA service and whatever else, and you don't have to buy it, and you can just play it streaming, and hooray, everybody wins, right? I think that there is some percentage of players that would be all right with that because they don't care, they don't notice that the quality is not the same as if you were running it locally. So. And I think it's fine. Whatever. There's going to be some segment of the market. There's going to be a large segment of the market, potentially as the years go on, for that sort of thing. Someone in chat is freaking out about like, yeah, the Chrono's like, hey, you want to pay $70 to temporarily own nothing? Holy shit, whatever. Like, yeah, welcome to gaming, dude. All these games run on servers that get shut off. Even when you buy physical games, you don't own shit. This already lost this fight. This war is already over. You can kick and scream about it. It's done. It's done. You're going to get a disc with half a game on it, and you're going to put it in 10 years from now and go like, it's time to play. And you're like, oh, it doesn't have the game on it, and that server was brought down 9 years ago. Okay. Like, that's not, like, it doesn't... And again, people on the PC have been fucking stoked for this change for decades. You know what I mean? People love Steam. People love Steam. Even when they don't. Even when Steam was broken in the beginning. People love Steam. They love Steam so much that anytime anyone tries to make anything other than Steam, they go, fuck this. I'm waiting for the game to come to Steam. Like, it's weird, honestly. I like Steam. People hated Steam. When it first came out, ooh, people hated Steam. Didn't take long for people to see the value of like, oh, what if I can just I can click this button and buy this game? Fantastic. People want convenience. It's just the way of things, man. Like, you can try to have this like principled take on it where like, no, we need to own our, like, do you own a copy of like, yeah, I own a copy of Destiny 1 on the Xbox 360. What are we doing with it? What are we going to have a good time with that? We're going to fucking jam out on some Destiny? No? I got a copy of Battlefield Hardline in the garage. I guess I could still play the single player. But like, it's not, the vast majority of consumers are like, we live in a world where people would rather subscribe to Netflix than buy Blu-rays. Despite the very visible qualitative difference in the two things. You have people out there that would rather download a fucking 720p fucking rip of a fucking live stream of a fucking movie than watch it on a fucking Blu-ray. People don't give a shit about this. People fucking watch movies on their fucking phones, man. People don't fucking care. People watch fucking movies from a guy holding a fucking camera up in a movie theater that they then superimpose a bunch of fucking gambling fucking links over the top of. Like, the ship fucking sailed at on every fucking at every turn. At every turn. That shit is fucking done, dude. You want to own a movie? Before too long, there's only going to be one way. And they don't like it. The other potential example for a new tier of Game Pass is one that's ad supported. Maybe I doubt that you would be able to get to a place where ads are covering the entire session and you're not paying any fee at all. But I would guess that there would be like, here's a cheaper version of the service where you can watch some ads. Maybe that's why some people were reporting 10-minute wait times until their cloud sessions were ready to start. Because they want to show 10 minutes of ads before you get in there. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I think you've got a lot of people, and I don't say this like, I'm not like stoked about this, but I think you've got a lot of people that think so lowly of their personal time and of their of the value that they put on things, that still sounds attractive to them. They're like, oh, what if I paid a lesser fee and got some ads and I was still able to do the thing? Yeah, GeForce Now has a free tier and they show ads. Yeah, so it's always possible that they do some kind of free tier, but I'm guessing they, GeForce Now still requires you to own the games. Even on their free tier, they're not giving you free games. There may be some free to play games, but at the end of the day, Microsoft is going to have to make some money on that over, ads are not lucrative. I'll tell you, video ads are not lucrative enough to cover the entire cost of buying a video game and then streaming it over and over again. So it's probably pretty unlikely that would be just a free tier. And the friends and family thing that they tested out a while ago for like a, sort of like the Spotify or YouTube premium, family accounts or whatever, where you get to, have 6 different people on the account, and you can, for Spotify, they need to know your home address. And so that's the sort of limit they put on it, thinking like, well, you're not going to give your home address to random strangers on the internet that you just think are cool, which I say, the home address on my Spotify account is fucking fake anyway. So what are you going to do about it? So yeah, I don't know. They tested this a while ago, and it kind of the test ended, and that was the end of that. But Jez Corden's column here makes it look like that they are potentially at least thinking about that, which I think, whatever. That's kind of like, I don't think anything he's saying there is like especially earth shattering. It's just like, hey, by the way, they're looking at every opportunity they have. And this is the stuff that in some ways I think it's made sense for years. And it's been weird that they haven't had some kind of cloud only version of the service, or cloud focused at least, in terms of, hey, we're aiming this right at people that don't own a console, don't want to play PC games because they don't have a powerful enough machine to do so. Like the people that exist in that kind of third category, where they are probably very budget minded. They can afford a subscription service, but they're not necessarily going to be able to put together $500 to go buy a console or whatever. I think it's weird that they haven't done that yet. So that just seems like a kind of a no-brainer sort of development, I would say. But I don't know what they would charge for it. What do you charge for a cloud only subscription? I guess you probably you could even break that into multiple tiers where you're like, hey, this is the cloud-only subscription that requires you to buy your games, and maybe this one is extremely low cost. Maybe this is something that is closer to a free tier or an ad-supported tier. And then there's the version that gets bundled with Game Pass. And then even then, they could have the day one games, no day one games variants on Game Pass there for a cloud-only subscription. Again, you know, the way Microsoft has always phrased their cloud ambitions, they talk about it always as it's about player choice. I think that they have a very convoluted subscription service right now, more so than it used to be. And I think adding even more tiers to it, you know, for as sensible as some of those tiers may seem, I think gets kind of ridiculous. I don't know. Yeah, maybe, yes, sure. And maybe, yes, there's bundling opportunities. Zorga in the chat says maybe they could bundle it with some ESPN streaming package. Sure. Why not? You know, yeah. What if there was some package that's like, here's ESPN Plus, here's a variant of the EA subscription that only gets you sports games, and the cloud streaming service for Xbox. There you go. Sure. Maybe, you know. As everyone is like getting desperate to bundle things up on the streaming end, I think being able to offer a gaming service inside of that package could potentially be very attractive to some consumers. If they're just like, here's fucking HBO Max and fucking Paramount Plus and Xbox in one thing. I don't know. And all of that said, tomorrow, July 24th, will be the start of the next season of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. It will also be the day that it debuts on Game Pass. And so we will start to see the effects of Call of Duty on Game Pass to some extent, because the current Call of Duty will be there tomorrow. They put out a post saying it, but the post is really just a description of what Modern Warfare 3 is, more than anything else. This is going to be the season where they put in WWE skins, so that could be neat. I don't know. I will take a look at those skins when they are released. I will let you know. There was also some talk that Valorant may be appearing on consoles this week. This was a leak originally. The Call of Duty side of the leak ended up being true, but the other part of it was that, and this is Video Games Chronicle recapping a writer from Xputer, that they say has a strong track record on Game Pass leaks, that basically saying that Valorant is scheduled for July 26th, which would be the end of this week. But I believe that has not been confirmed or denied one way or the other. But the Modern Warfare 3 side of it did end up being true. So we'll see what happens there. And lastly, on the Microsoft side of things, the Halo TV show got canceled. Paramount Plus decided that they did not want any more of it. After 2 seasons of Halo, Paramount Plus has said, nah, we're good. Which is funny, because wasn't like the end of season 2 the part where John finally got to the Halo? Like it was 2 seasons of build-up. And then they finally get to fucking Halo. And then they're like, we know how this ends, man. We're good. For their part, the other stakeholders in this program are looking to keep it going. Those being Microsoft as well as Amblin Television. They are going to attempt to shop the show around and see if they can find a home for it, from the sounds of things. So it might not be quite dead yet, but it will not happen at Paramount Plus. 343 Industries had this to say: "We deeply appreciate the millions of fans who propelled the Halo series to be a global success, and we remain committed to broadening the Halo universe in different ways in the future. We are grateful to Amblin and Paramount for their partnership in bringing our expansive sci-fi universe to viewers around the world." Yeah. I don't know. I feel like people were very hot and cold on the Halo TV show. The season 2 was a real like, oh boy. Like maybe they're not wrong to cancel it, I guess is my point. But we'll see. In other shooter news, Splitgate 2 has been, formally announced. This is something that the Splitgate developers had an awards show a while back that basically said, hey, and even when they said, hey, we're going to stop working on Splitgate because we want to work on something that's a lot like Splitgate but bigger, I believe was basically what they said. They more or less said, hey, we're gonna taper down Splitgate 1 development so that we can really get going on Splitgate 2. And then they had their awards show with a teaser that I think I said at the time, man, no one reported on this. Like people in their community saw it, I'm sure, but not a lot of talk about Splitgate 2. But now they have gone and formally announced Splitgate 2. If you remember, Splitgate was the game that came out at the exact right time and was like the pace and feel of Halo, but with the portals of Portal. And it's neat. And some people got way fucking into it. And it had, it came out when demand for a new Halo was kind of at its height, before Halo Infinite had come out, and people were like, yeah, and people really latched onto Splitgate. And it's a good game. I don't know. I played a handful of matches of Splitgate, and I was like, this is a well-made thing. It's fun. It's weird. The portal aspect of it was good and weird and made you think in different ways about how you did shooter stuff. Also at the same time, like, yeah, it looked a little too much like Halo in some spots, and you're like, this feels like a game that was made in a dorm room. Co-founder Ian Prowse had this to say: "The original Splitgate's development was ambitious but scrappy. The game was created from a dorm room." Who could have known? "And the massive success and community it earned surpassed our wildest dreams. This time around, Splitgate 2 has been designed from the ground up in Unreal Engine 5 to deliver the AAA FPS experience our fans deserve. With the series' signature action completely overhauled by an all-star team composed of the most talented individuals in the industry. This is a revolutionary step forward for competitive shooters. It is the perfect entry point for players new to the world of Splitgate, and a comprehensive upgrade worthy of our existing community." It'll be out next year on PC, PS5, basically like two generations of consoles and the PC. So PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series devices. And they released some kind of companion app on phones that contains collectibles which can be used to unlock content in the game when it's out, according to VideoGamesChronicle.com. That seems like a bit much. How do you think this is going to go? Like I said, I think Splitgate is a cool game. The idea of them remaking it into something even bigger sounds potentially interesting, but they really caught lightning in a bottle with that first game. And the idea of them saying, designed from the ground up in Unreal Engine 5 to deliver the AAA FPS experience our fans deserve, to me, that could go... That sounds a lot like... That looks like Wayne's Basement, but that's not Wayne's Basement. It sounds like there's a high potentiality for them to spend a whole lot of their money that they made on Splitgate 1, making a thing that, like, is... on paper, better in every way, and potentially lacks every bit of soul that first game had. Easy to say when they haven't really shown much beyond a cinematic or something like that. And again, I continue to have high hopes for Splitgate 2, but There is something about them saying we've gone out and got the latest engine technology and we've hired a bunch of people from the world of shooters to get out there and work with us and do. We'll see. Something about the way all that stuff is phrased made me feel icky about it. But yeah, best of luck to them. It'll be out next year. And yeah, the companion app is full of like lore, like yes, comics from that get into the lore of the Splitgate universe, which is not. That's not something anyone needs. And I gotta say, again, not to just like sit here and hammer home this thing that I've hatched upon, but I think something about saying we've got a phone app out for our shooter that has lore about the world of the game we made that's Halo plus Portals. You didn't need to do this, man. You just didn't. We'll see. We'll see. A build of Space Marine 2 leaked out. There was said to be an old, about a year old. Well, okay, this makes it sound like, according to VideoGamesChronicle.com, this sounds like it'll be about a year old, or that it's a build from last September, I guess, is the idea here. The build is said to be playable from start to finish. The publisher and developer have issued a statement about the leak of said build, urging players to not play it. Yeah. We are deeply touched by the overwhelming support we've received from our community following the leak of an old build of our upcoming game, Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2. Our teams have poured years of hard work, passion, and dedication into creating a game worthy of your hopes and expectations, and it's disheartening that many of the surprises we worked to keep secret were spoiled. We're saddened that this build, which will be almost a year old by the time we launch, is how some of our most eager fans will first experience Space Marine 2. Blah, 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 blah. We're asking everyone to avoid this unfinished build and to not spoil the game for those excited to experience for the first time at launch. Space Marine 2 will release on September 9th. And the best way to support our team's hard work is to play the game as they've always intended. See you all in a few weeks. For the Emperor. Okay. It's always fascinating when stuff like this happens. Lock the door? Okay. My son's gotten really good at locking the door, and he's locked the rest of the family out, so I'm going to go let them back in. I'll be right back. Yeah, my son got in first and then locked the door behind him. Good stuff. Good stuff. He's a devious dude, man. He's getting good at locking doors. I now I don't leave the house without my keys anymore because of it. When I am the only adult home, because I don't trust them to be able to unlock doors. I've spent time thinking about how I would break into my own home if I had to. How about that? Yeah, no, my daughter just turned 5 last week, and that's, man, crazy. They're getting really crafty. And that's good. They're very smart. But also, oh no. Oh no, they're very smart. Anyway, back to the news. The Verge has some updates via The Information. which is a publication, about future plans for Facebook's upcoming virtual reality headsets. Like the Quest 4, perhaps, if they had decided to call it that. I almost bought a Quest 3 during the, because last week was the sale thing, and so a couple of retailers they had $70 off the Quest 3, but it was the 128 gig version, not the 512 gig version, which is, I don't think you need more than that. You probably don't need more than 128 gigs anyway. But I ended up not pulling the trigger on it because I just didn't. I was all ready to do it, and I was like, yeah, no, okay, I should upgrade to the latest and see, people say the screens on the 3 are much better than the 2. I have a 2 here that I barely use. Why not? And then I got to the point where it was like, okay, I can click these buttons and add it to a cart and buy it. And I was like, no. That price is still not good enough. And so I didn't. But it looks like Meta will not have a new headset until 2026. They've got a few different code names in here, which are always fun. The Quest 4 will purportedly have a standard and premium version referred to internally as Pismo Low and Pismo High. There is a higher-end version of the headset, codenamed La Jolla, set for 2027. And they say here that is meant to compete with the Apple Vision Pro, which doesn't seem like something worth competing with, but I don't know. And that's kind of the long and short of it, that if you're buying a Quest 3, there probably won't be a better consumer-level headset unless Valve pulls the trigger on whatever the fuck they've been doing until 2026. Meanwhile, I have the app for, it used to be the Oculus app, and it was a store, and it was where you went if you wanted to buy games for your Oculus Rift, and then eventually your Oculus Quest. And then it turned into the Meta app and the Meta Quest app and now over the last week they have changed it yet again to where it is now the Meta Horizon app, and they have refocused the entirety of the app around Meta Horizon, which is like their fucking shitty VR fucking theme park chat room hangout session thing, which is like VR chat with fucking none of the fucking excitement. Now it's like, oh, you can go and look at these Horizon spaces. No. Can I uninstall all of the Horizon? And now the store part of it, which is the part of the app that is actually fucking useful, is now a separate button up at the top. And now it's like, oh, well, how do I get to fucking the spot where I can buy VR apps? Congratulations on making it harder for people to buy VR things. I'm sure all developers of VR software are stoked that you buried it a layer deeper. There's still a storefront on the device itself. So, but with the phone app, you can, if your system is in standby and all that stuff, you can buy it all and it will install it and it will be ready for you the next time you go to your headset. It's decidedly convenient when it all works. Anyway, new headsets in 2026. Why? Is the resolution just like is the resolution in Beat Saber not high enough? Do we need to have like a few? We need a more powerful headset so that Beat Saber can run slightly better on it. What else is anyone doing in fucking VR at like a large scale? Like the Gorilla Tag. It's like 3 things, and some of them have been around for years. Anyway. Yeah, it feels like that this is just like a fucking, like, someone wakes up one morning and says, oh, we're done with this. Like Mark Zuckerberg just wakes up one morning and says, I've been a fool. Or shareholders finally get to him and be like, hey, what the fuck are you doing? Because the amount of money that they keep throwing into that division, which there is other reporting out there saying that a lot of the money being poured into that division is being wasted due to mismanagement and a lot of other stuff, that it's not necessarily, hey, well, this is the cost of innovation. That it's more like, no, this is the cost of having a bunch of dipshits in your division, fucking it all up at a high level by not understanding anything about the space that they're in. Bunch of non-VR people making a bunch of calls in a VR division. Sounds rad. Sounds like a fun place to work, if you ask me. Speaking of places to work, Warner Brothers has bought the developer of Multiverses, according to Video Games Chronicle, for an undisclosed sum. We don't know the amount of money, but they bought the developer. The developer's down in San Diego. Warner has a San Diego team, and so this studio will now report into the leadership of the San Diego studio. My understanding is that they're like, I think I was saying it last week, that there's like people at Warner San Diego that are like names from the Midway era. Your John Tobiases and Sal DeVitas and stuff, I believe they are both still there. They could be gone now, but they were there at one point. Multiverse's new season starts today. They're adding more characters to it. Is this a purchase because they're so stoked with how well Multiverses is going? Or is this a sign that Multiverses was going so bad that they needed to buy this studio, or the studio was going to go under? Who can say? I don't know. Like there does seem like that there's some audience for Multiverses. I was saying last week that, like, are people still playing this? But it does seem like there is still some kind of hype around it. Despite it maybe not having the best relaunch that it could have had, it does seem like that there are still people potentially on board with it. So that's got to be something kind of awesome for, man, imagine being on the team for this game and how unsure, how crazy this process has been of, like, we've got to shut the game down, we got to bring it back, we got to do this. These sign that people are still playing it. And hey, hopefully, some of the people at that studio get some decent payouts from this buyout. I don't know how they're structured or anything like that, but now Warner owns it. Warner is not, Suicide Squad probably left a pretty big crater in the financials, at least for the game group. I know that when they were giving their financials, they did kind of say that Suicide Squad was having an outsized effect on the entire business, not just the games division. I don't know if this is necessarily attached to that or if it's kind of its own thing. Mortal Kombat Onslaught is going to be shut down. It has been removed from stores as of yesterday. This is the phone game. This is the Mortal Kombat phone game that has been around for under a year. It is that's the Video Games Chronicle is billing it. They build it as a strategic team-based collection RPG. So it wasn't quite a gacha game from what I saw of it. I'm trying to think if I downloaded this one or if I downloaded whatever the previous Mortal Kombat game they did for phones was. I don't know that I got this one. Anyway, either way, the game will be shut down as of October 21st. They have removed it from the app stores as of yesterday, and in-game purchases will be disabled a month from today, August 23rd. Not part of this story, and not part of their announcement of shutting the game down, is that there have also apparently been layoffs at NetherRealm. My understanding is that those layoffs are part of the mobile division, so it's presumably largely the people that were responsible for this game. I have heard somewhere in the neighborhood of around 50 people getting cut. around this same announcement. So presumably this game was not working, and that they are shutting it down. But it's hard not to wonder with some of the other kind of failures in the games division and just like the stink that exists on Warner Brothers Discovery at a corporate level and some of the things they're doing and not doing. Why moves like this happen. But I will say I did not hear anyone talking about this mobile game. So, it's as tempting as it is to wrap it up in the larger story of Warner Brothers. That just might not be the case. But either way, it sounds like about 50 people were cut from NetherRealm's internal mobile team. Best wishes to them, as well as everyone at Humble from the sounds of things. I guess during the podcast here, the Humble Publishing, is it just the publishing side of Humble? Like the bundle still exists, but the publisher arm is going away? That is what I am seeing in the chat, I believe. Yeah, just the publishing side so far. Yes. That's a weird one because I think it's confusing to people that Humble was publishing their own games and selling them separately, because you would hear about games that were part of Humble and you're like, oh, is it part of their bundle thing? Like I don't really follow their bundle thing. I don't know what they're it always kind of felt murky. Well, I don't know. Yeah, it's not impossible to understand that no, these are games that they're publishing and you can buy them separately. But I feel like that some people, the first time they heard about it, would always be like, what? They're making, okay, well, that's weird. So yeah, I don't know. Them having a publishing division always seemed ever so slightly weird to me in the first place, I guess I would say. I don't know what this is. Okay, yeah. This is from an Emily Kiefer, who was QA at Humble Bundle. Today is mine and my entire team's last day at Humble Games. This team was genuinely the best team I've ever worked with. Yeah, so this is someone out there now looking for something. Yeah, the entirety of Humble Games is how she puts it. But is Humble Games just the publishing arm, and then Humble Bundle is what they call the... Yeah, well, that's technically an IGN layoff because they owned all that. They bought all that at some point. To which I would also say the idea of IGN owning a video game publisher is super weird, ethically speaking. And then the team who won the Splatoon 3 World Championship, Nintendo put out a statement. I'm not sure what this is even referring to, but it sounds fucking gross automatically. It has come to our attention that certain members of Team Jackpot, the team that recently won the Splatoon 3 World Championship, acted in a manner that is not in line with our community guidelines while playing the Splatoon 3 game. As a result, Team Jackpot's win will be considered vacated, and the team will not receive trophies associated with the event. In addition, the in-game splash tag banner commemorating their win will be adjusted via an upcoming software update. Nintendo cares deeply about our players and our community, and we take our responsibility to uphold our community guidelines seriously. Did they fling shit in a hotel hallway like the Pokemon people did? Is it... Oh, just... Okay. Racism. Got it. Okay. Yep. Scumbags. I gotcha. Okay. Scumbags. Sure. Well, that's the news. Let's get into some emails, huh? How about it? I've got an email here. That's the wrong button. I've got an email here from the company that made the chair that I bought, asking me to give it a 1 to 5 star rating. I don't know. The numbness in my fingers went away. When I bought this chair, the tip of my index finger on my mouse and hand went numb for a while there, and it occasionally would drift down into the thumb. And that seems like that'd be like, whether that's some RSI or something, or just, I don't know. This chair is more ergonomic, but it definitely was an adjustment period for my entire body to be in a different chair. But hey, that feeling went away. My trigger finger ain't throbbing like it was for about a month there. That's pretty sweet. I guess that's a thumbs up. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. The steel case, this is a steel case gesture that I'm sitting in. Not a cheap chair, but well regarded. I got a lot of positive word of mouth from people I know and trust about this chair, and I bought it, and it kind of feels like it's always leaning a little bit to the right, which is technically impossible considering the way the chairs are built, but I don't. Is it better than the shitty yellow chair I had? So when my finger was throbbing, I would have told you no. I would have said absolutely not. Because I almost brought Big Yellow back in here. When my hand was at its worst. But that resolved itself magically, which is good because I got this stupid vibrator. Like a podcast vibrator that you use on your back that they sell on podcasts. At least that's where I got it. I don't know. And I shot that into my back as hard as I could. And, because, it felt like it just felt like a pinched nerve or something. I don't know. But either way, that feeling went away. This chair seems okay, but it also feels a little rickety. And my kids like to hang on it, which I hope it is sturdy enough to handle that because, oh boy. The massage device came with extreme instructions about do not put this on your genitals or your face. I can tell you, I did not put it on my genitals, but I did try to use it on my face when my TMJ was acting up. And I don't know, it helped. It helped my jaw feel a little bit better for 5 minutes. Anyway, let's get into the real emails here. podcast@guard.bike is the email address. We'll start with this one that just came in from Anders in Norway. He says, I'm guessing you have a similar opinion on travel that I do. I have not been out of the country in over 20 years. If you could go anywhere for free travel and hotel, food, everything, where would you go? Wife and children are coming and are equally comfortable. Man. Those are very different answers. Those are extremely different answers. Because if the entire family is coming, then I have to go somewhere where there's fun for the entire family. And that's probably just, at this point, Disneyland, which we went to Disneyland last week. It's like an hour away. But I want to go to Tokyo again. I want to go to Japan. I want to go to Osaka specifically because I've never been there and I want to buy games there instead. I want to see what the game shops in Osaka look like these days. I would have loved to have gone to Bit Summit. Every year, Bit Summit looks like a really good time. Bit Summit is just happened or is still happening. I think it is over, but Bit Summit just happened and it always looks like awesome. But yeah, I don't know. I want to go back to Tokyo and, eat weird food and buy weird shit and just have fun. I want to see a wrestling show. I would like to go to Japan and go see some TJPW shows. And my wife and kids would not want to go to a wrestling show under any circumstances, though my daughter did ask me what's wrestling the other day. And I had to say, it's like fake fighting. It's like a TV show. They're just like pretending to fight, and they do stories and like they do stuff. And she was mostly satisfied by that answer. Like, okay, and did not inquire any further into it. But yeah, if the wife and kids are coming, then I'd want to go someplace that would have some really fun, cool kids stuff to do. And, someplace with a big theme park. Like, it would be tempting to say Disney World, but like, I'm not going to be like, if I go anywhere, I'd go to Florida. Fuck no. They shut down the fucking Highlight place. Why would I go to Florida? Yeah, Tokyo Disney Sea, maybe. Tokyo Disney. I have never been there, but I have been on a train that goes past Disneyland in Japan a lot of times, and that's always looked cool. But yeah, I don't know. Someplace for them, really. Like if we were all going somewhere. But like I don't know. I want to go. I really want to go back to Tokyo, but I don't want to go for like fucking like touristy reasons. I want to have a fucking. I want to go and buy a bunch of shit, and I want to interview people. Like I want to go there for work stuff. Like, so yeah, I don't know. I'm not opposed to travel. Like I haven't traveled. I haven't really been anywhere in, since 2019 or 2018 or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not opposed to traveling. I think my passport expired. I should probably get that renewed, but I don't know when that would ever happen. Traveling with kids sounds like a totally different and very taxing thing, especially with the ages that they're at right now. A 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 9-month-old. It's even Disneyland was a bit of a beast in a couple of ways, and that was just a day trip. But it was super fun. Like, and my daughter was such a trooper. We waited in line for the Dumbo ride for like a pretty long time, and I thought for sure she was going to be like done, but we had to do a lot of dancing and I had to pick her up and do a bunch of different stuff, but we got on that goddamn Dumbo ride, and it was a good time for all of like a minute and a half, like waiting 45 minutes for a minute, like a 3-minute ride. Anyway, let's see here. If we go back to right here. Gregory writes in and says, I kind of feel like Apple is missing the point with them trying to bring AAA games to their mobile devices and tablets. I just got the new Apple Air. I assume that means the iPad. I don't know what an Apple Air is. Is it a MacBook? Is it an iPad? Anyway, and tried out RE4, and it kind of sucks trying to play on there. Am I nuts? And this is the way of the future, or does this feel like a weird thing to focus on for them? I mean, if you believe some of the news reports that have been around for the past few weeks here, you are one of like 2,000 people or something, or one of like 30,000 people that downloaded Resident Evil 4 on a phone or tablet. It sounds like that entire endeavor has been a fucking disaster. Like there's some of the, and the reporting is always kind of weird because it's reports coming from a mobile focused site that are taking metrics from a mobile metrics company that doesn't necessarily have Apple's direct stats. And so they're kind of estimating. I'm not saying that the numbers are bad and wrong, just that they are not guaranteed 100% accurate. That said, they are ballpark good enough that when they basically say, hey, Capcom made something like $30,000 on that version of Resident Evil 4, because it sold 2,000 copies. I find that very easy to believe, because the idea of playing Resident Evil 4 on a phone or tablet, and Death Stranding came out there as well, and it sounds like that it also did not do well. Like, people just don't want that style of game on phones, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that that's a very normal and natural way to feel. That like, hey, I don't want to do this on a fucking phone, and I don't want to pay this kind of money for a game on a phone, when the vast majority of said games are free to play. Like, it's just a very different market. And the idea that these developers were coming in, whether it was because Apple was spurring them on or whatever, the idea of playing that type of game with that type of session length on a mobile device is terrible. It's not, people don't want to do that. And so they did not flock to this product. They're not interested in playing this type of game on this type of device. Now, when you take that information and extrapolate it a little bit further into people who are trying to get you to play console games on a phone, this is not a great story for the Xbox streaming service, which one of their early use cases was like, hey, you can play on a phone, and you can do this and you can do that. Like, it seems pretty clear that players don't want to do that. They might do it as an add-on for like, oh, well, you know, I mainly play this game this way, but I need to log in and turn in my dailies on Destiny or something, and I can do that on my phone really quick, which you could argue that maybe Bungie should just make a phone app that lets you do the kind of non-gameplay parts of those games on a phone or something. Which Sega sort of did with PSO 2 on Android devices at one point. Anyway, people don't want to play console games on phones with the length, what it does to your battery life, what it does to, like, there's just a lot of things about that that are not attractive. Or even if they're attractive, like, to you theoretically, the way you use a phone, the way you want to use a phone, the length of time you have to use a phone before you have to save your game and do this and do that, like, it just doesn't always work. It doesn't always make sense. And so the idea of trying to put those games onto those devices always seemed like a really cursed effort to me in the first place. Because players don't want to do that. You can, okay. So there is apparently a Destiny 2 app that lets you do some of that stuff. All right, cool. So, you know, like, mobile games are successful because they play to the strengths of the platform. And I think shoehorning a full-on console game onto those devices is just a dumb idea. But I would have said the same thing about competitive multiplayer games like that Call of Duty Warzone thing that came out, and, you know, you can play full, and obviously Fortnite was on phones at one point, and PUBG and whatever else. That's something that I look at and go like, I don't want to do this on a phone. But that's where it becomes generational. And you've got younger kids that maybe don't have access to another platform, and they want to play it that way because it's the only way they can play it. And that sort of makes a little bit more sense. And a lot of those kids went on to become Switch owners, I think, in the wake of Fortnite disappearing from phones for that length of time there. Every kid I know plays it on a Switch. So, I don't know. That Call of Duty Warzone thing is especially weird because it's not just Warzone. Like, when you load it up, it's, you know, it presents you with playlists. And it'll be like, hey, man, do you want to play on Shipment 24/7? You're like, yes, I do. Yes, I do. That's why Yes. I loaded it up yesterday because I forgot it was on my phone. I looked at it and went like, oh, right, that thing. Shit. Huh. And loaded it up, and it was like, that's Chong right there. Look at that. Look at Chong doing Chong things. But it's not cross-play with regular Call of Duty or anything like that. Like, it's its own weird separate thing on top of all that, or at least in the competitive multiplayer stuff. I think the Warzone stuff may cross over. Anyway, I forget. Anyway, the more you play it, the better it looks. But yeah, I think just like generally speaking, those types of games are not appealing to players that play games on those platforms. Whether that is due to just like generation gap type of reasons, but also just like I think that form of game is just not something people want to do on a phone. Grant writes in and posits this nightmare question. If The Order 1886 was released in 2006 for the PS3 alongside Gears for the 360, would it have been seen as amazing? Or was it always just a mediocre one of those? I mean, it's really hard to play that scenario out, but it would not have been... The game was just not as good. It was a very good-looking game, even when it came out. But the video game part of the video game was no good. And I think if you put it out alongside Gears of War, that would have been even more noticeable. Because when it did come out, it was like, oh, here's kind of another Gears style game. And oh, it's really shiny and looks really nice. And it's just like, these kind of quick time events and this and that. And, you know, like the weird letterboxing of the screen and So I don't think there was ever a scenario where that exact game would be lauded as some like amazing gameplay product. It's because it's just not. It just ain't that. It never was. Michael writes in and says, with everyone saying there's something, his question specifically is, which era or generation of gaming got you the most worried or frustrated? With everyone saying there's something wrong or depressing with the video game industry lately, it got me wondering what era or moment of gaming clicked the least with you, or had you worried the most about the direction of the industry? Is it when Myst was the hottest latest? When it became clear the dream of the Dreamcast and Sega was rapidly changing? When motion controls and Kinect were everywhere? For me, it was Myst. For me, it was definitely Myst. So the three examples you're giving here, when motion controls and Kinect were everywhere, that was a mild, like, I don't know, something about this doesn't feel good. Like when the Wii was super popular, but a lot of the games were dog shit. It was like, man, Nintendo sure did make 3 amazing games for this thing. And then a bunch of other developers sure did come in and make a bunch of fucking trash. It was a weird feeling of just like, this is really popular and it's getting people to play games that don't normally play games, which you would say is a good thing. But if everyone learns the wrong lesson from it, that could be bad. The Dreamcast stuff was like, I think it was largely a whatever. Like it was a nostalgic sadness, the idea that Sega was getting out of the console hardware market, but at the same time things were so rapidly changing, and we were on the cusp of Microsoft getting into the business, which would be its own weird thing at first there. But ultimately the reason the Dreamcast didn't work out was because the PlayStation 2 was so good. You didn't care. It was like, again, it was a nostalgic, like, oh, it's a shame that Sega didn't make it. Anyway, back to playing Tekken over, or whatever, right? Like there were so many amazing PlayStation 2 games coming out all the time that it was just kind of like whatever. It wasn't like a big problem. It was more just like again, sadness if you did it for a long time. I was, when Myst got big, I was 16 or 17 or something like that. And it was coming out around the same time as the time that when first-person shooters really got hot with stuff like Doom. And so seeing Myst come out, and you saw all these mainstream articles, which, some relative would always cut them out of the newspaper and give them, you like the video games, I cut this out for you in case you wanted to see it. And it was always some story about how big Myst was. And how Myst is appealing to all these people that never played a video game, and video games are growing up, and they're not just for kids. And look at this amazing video game. Look at how incredible this video game is. And Myst is a fucking piece of shit. It's a fucking Macromedia fucking director file. Like it's you know, it's pretty pictures strung together. It's a sham. It's a sham in the same way that Dragon's Lair was a sham and Laserdisc gaming was a sham. And that's how I felt about it at the time. You know, it was like, this thing is fucking barely a goddamn video game. Like, look at the others, and especially when you saw all the other games that were coming out at the time on computers and just where video games were really headed, it was very easy to see that and go, oh, shit. Like, this thing is fucking getting all the attention right now. Everyone is talking about how amazing Myst is. And I tried to play Myst. I sat down and tried to play Myst multiple times. And I was like, fuck this. And it was really frustrating. It was worrisome because you were like, because all the multimedia CD-ROM industry was starting to happen and all these headlines in magazines about like Silicon Valley and Hollywood together, it's Sillywood, and they're making video games go even further. Look at these photorealistic, you know, like, but all those things, again, it was just, here's the fucking fanciest looking HyperCard stack you've ever gotten your eyes on. Like, here you go. It's a fucking choose your own adventure with pictures and some occasional motion. And compared to a lot of the other stuff that was happening at the time, it was so frustrating to see video games like getting off the path of making things that felt good to play. Video games that felt good in your hand, as opposed to stare at this static image, and when you click on it, you'll see a 5 frame per second thing of what is supposed to be you walking to the next static image so that you can turn some fucking metal disc, fucking line up some bullshit in the fucking worst puzzle game ever made. On top of that, it was a fucking sucked ass compared to so many of the point and click adventure games that had come before it. I just did not like Myst. And so it was very hard. And I was at the exact right age to be very fucking self-righteous and the fucking worst person alive about it, right? And so it felt very bad. It felt very bad at the time. Because you looked at it and you're like, oh man, are all video games... Because everyone was saying like, oh, this is... all video games are going to be like this going forward. Like, look at how popular Myst is, and this is the CD-ROM industry is getting bigger by the day. And you're just looking at it happen and it's going like, wait, no, what about, have you seen, you get it's a shotgun. It was very troublesome. It was the first time there was this feeling of just like, oh man, the video games I like are rapidly going out of style, and instead they're going to make this fucking garbage. When mobile phones got big for the first time, there was, and this was kind of prior to the launch of the PlayStation 4, and when you had that feeling, because a lot of game developers were really openly wondering about it and going like, what's going to happen with phones? Phone games are going to be too big. Phone games are where the money is. Like, consoles are dead. You know, like a lot of that talk was going around. And so it was also this similar feeling of just like, that gum I like, is it ever going to go back in style, or are we just fucked? And you know, and that ended up not going that way, right? And phone games have carved out their own specific market. It's a very large one, but it speaks to players that in a lot of cases might not ever consider playing any of the video games that you and I appreciate playing. And I'm sure that you, at this point, probably do play some games on your phone. I mean, there are so many anime ladies that you could be pulling out of a machine. And they have, some of them have 5 stars. 5-star anime ladies are waiting for you. And so, yeah, you know, like that stuff found its footing. And I think players eventually, you know, like when phone games first started getting, I just thought of this guy. I will not say who this person is because it's not relevant to it, but it was someone who had been is still doing public relations and had been doing PR for a very long time. And I remember it was probably on LinkedIn or something like that, but it was, or maybe Facebook, but it was, he was saying, you know, cause he had started representing some phone games, and, you know, he's contacting people like us at publications that cover video games. And we're saying like, nah, we're good. or just not getting back to him. And when he was representing amazing console publishers and stuff like that, you know, you were always on the phone with this person because they always had something new coming out and whatever. And then suddenly like, oh, it's harder to get a call back when you're representing free-to-play phone games that no one gives a shit about. And he wrote this really long thing about like, you guys are being left behind. You're by your stubbornness in not covering these games, you're shooting yourself in the foot, you're doing this, you're doing that. In some ways I think it was right, but I also don't think that there was any way out of it, because I've said it before, so I won't belabor the point too much, but the audience didn't want it. The reason we didn't devote a ton of time to covering mobile games, especially free-to-play mobile games, was because when we did, the response was straight up hostile. And why review a game that's available for free? In a lot of cases, I think that's, there are reasons to review because of the way they monetize and so on and so forth. I think there are plenty of reasons to actually review free-to-play games, but something about the nature of what free-to-play phone games were then and how the barrier to entry was zero. There were not a lot of reasons and not a lot of interest in covering those types of products. And so that was a weird time. That was a weird time for gaming. And right now, right now is a weird time for different reasons. Right now is the most wolf in sheep's clothing that gaming has ever been, if you think about it. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, or whether you think games are good right now or bad right now, I guess is the actual talking point. But if you think about it, like, and we were talking about it with the First Descendant and Genshin Impact and some of this other stuff, is you have a lot of people, a lot of developers that maybe made their money in free to play on phones that are now like investing in making sure that their games look great and they look like console games and they play like console games and they fit into the console space in a much more direct way. And so you have you have this sort of situations where Nexon and Tencent and a lot of these other companies can put these games out and attract that console audience that hated them when they were just making phone games. And so now these games look and feel like proper, quote unquote, B-tier video games, let's say. Because even Genshin Impact, you look at it and you're like, oh, this is like some kind of like sub-Zelda weird fucking thing. All right, okay. And so they're not churning out games that look like they fit in lockstep with the games that win Game of the Year and the big tentpole franchises that the biggest publishers get out when they get them out. But they're putting out, like, in some ways, they're putting out the B games of today. The First Descendant is like a good example of like, hey, yeah, this game doesn't feel awesome, but it feels like good enough that you could put 20 hours into this thing and move on to something else. Sure, why not? Genshin Impact, I'm sure people have spent hundreds of hours playing that thing. But anyway, so I think right now is a very weird time for games because, again, you do have these kind of like widespread layoffs at the variety of like publishers across the board, especially in the kind of traditional game space. But then also, the free to play is not doing amazingly well in some cases too. But you've got a lot of this kind of free to play stuff coming along, looking better and better all the time in ways that are sometimes troubling. Your Zenless Zone Zeros and stuff, like amazingly stylistic looking game, and like Zenless Zone Zero, as I spent a little bit more time with it, I was like, I hate the way this game feels. I just hate the way this game feels. It's not there. It's not where it needs to be. Ultimately, that was the thing that broke me off of Genshin Impact. It was like, this is really appealing. But then I got to a point where there was, I was like, okay, I've spent all my time in the menus and pulling ladies out of fucking things, and now I've got to go play this game. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is acceptable, but I'm gonna do something else. But also right now you have some of the most exciting and widespread and varied indie game development that we've ever had. You know, indie games big and small. You know, we live in a world where a game like Clickolding can come out and be a 30-minute experience, and they can charge $2 or $3 for it. We live in a world where a game like Skate Unit X can exist and be this kind of loving homage to, you know, an earlier era of video games, and you know, Arctic Eggs and Pizza Tower and like all this other Vampire Survivors, you know, and just and tons more. Like, you know, sometimes it feels like there's just an infinite number of types of games happening out there all the time. They're just coming from smaller publishers, or smaller developers rather, and sometimes self-publishing. And I think that that's really exciting, and it's a really great space right now. It's a very necessary, like that. At times indie gaming felt like an add-on. You know, you're like, oh, it's great that this stuff is here too. I'll play it between these other games. When those other games ain't hitting, indie games filled the gap. There's way more of them, and that's, I'm sure, scary for a lot of the people that are trying to succeed on Steam, that there are a zillion games coming out every single goddamn day. And, you know, that dark feeling of like, oh, I'm one viral TikTok away from this indie game making its money back or not, or, you know, it's like crazy shit like that. Like the market and how games become successful sometimes is a really dark fucking path. But then we're also faced with, like, yeah, you know, a lot of these games, you know, like Destiny 2 or Destiny as a concept is a decade old at this point, and that's still a live service game that is still making updates even after their last big expansion. And, you know, like, that's going to take up people's time. Obviously, we have things like Minecraft and Roblox and, you know, like these kind of Fortnite, you know, these games that are meant to be updated all the time, and why play anything else? Because you could just play this. Like, it's, you know, that stuff is terrifying in its own weird way. So hey, you don't need me to tell you. You see it. It's crazy out there. It's fucking crazy out there. And best wishes to everyone out there that is trying to put anything out ever, because Jesus Christ. Ryan from Texas asks the question, was Sunset Overdrive any good? I remember wanting the white Xbox One bundle so bad, but had no idea what Sunset Overdrive was and never played it. If you just asked for a one-word answer, I would say sure. If you asked me for a deeper answer, I would say not especially. Sunset Overdrive did some interesting things with mobility at a time when a lot of games weren't doing that, but there's not enough game there. And I think that mobility stuff is clunky. And I did not enjoy it. But it's got a great look. It's got style. It's got great style, I guess is what I mean here. But no, Sunset Overdrive, and Sunset Overdrive kind of got a real mythic reputation. Like, people really latched onto it in ways that when it gets talked about these days, people are like, oh, Sunset Overdrive was overlooked. It was this overlooked gem, and like, yeah, sure. Kusanagi in the chat says, it's fun like people say Recore is fun. That's the most fucked up thing anyone has ever said about a video game. And I like Recore. I might be one of those people that says, yeah, Recore, that's fun. I had fun with Recore. I remember having fun with Recore. You know what? I remember having fun with Recore and then reaching a point where I was no longer having fun with Recore. And I think I finished Recore. Fucking Recore, man. And then they like re-released it and did it's just let's see here. Tony from Phoenix Bryson says, after recently beating Symphony of the Night and Final Fantasy X, I thought, how come so many games have you kill your dad? There are just so many like Sekiro and Hades that call you to kill that man. Why is that? I just assumed statistically most dads suck. Is there games where you kill moms? It's the cats in the cradle, silver spoon, the moon, that whole thing. It's the generation coming up killing off the previous generation. Like it's meant to represent that, right? It's meant to represent the path forward, except in situations where they make the dad actually super evil, and then you gotta you gotta kill your evil dad. I mean, come on. But yeah, I don't know. To me, that's always just been kind of like a very easy way to represent a changing of generations, or a changing of the guard, or a changing of opinions, or moving forward and not making the same mistakes that the previous generation did. And dads get the brunt of that. For a lot of different reasons. Paul writes in, what's the best Rockstar game? My top spot easily goes to Red Dead Redemption. GTA San Andreas is my runner-up. I'm curious which of their games takes the crown in your opinion. Oh, man. It's probably San Andreas. Well, look. San Andreas is so big and so vast and so weird, while also feeling grounded in that motherfucking gangsta shit that I love so much. That it is, in a lot of ways, GTA San Andreas felt like it was built specifically for me, white hip hop fan, from the West Coast, yeah, I don't know, man. But it also has all that fucking jetpack and all the ridiculous shit. Like they went for it. They made the weirdest game that in some ways that they have ever made. Because of how many, hey, you can, in this one, you can get fat and skinny again. And you can, if you punch people, you'll be better at punch. Like they went in heavy into systems. Like they really just like sat down and said, well, how can we make this fucking even crazier and more realistic, man? Like, what can we do to, and they came up with all these insane fucking schemes about, you're gonna go eat burgers and it's gonna make you fucking fat, dude. You're like, yeah, no, hey, believe me, I know, I'm well aware. San Andreas is probably the right answer here. I think you could try to make your dark horse answers about Bully. I love Bully. I think Bully's an incredible video game. I don't think it's the best game they've ever made. Like I don't think like Manhunt is really interesting, or rather Manhunt was really interesting. Manhunt and Manhunt 2 are games that don't really get talked about very much anymore. But they seemed like a very big deal at the time, and now they almost seem like comical. But and table tennis, I guess, but only because Jesper's such a fucking dick. Now, table tennis is actually a really disappointing game for me because of the lack of accessibility options. The entire way they represent spin on the ball in that game is by having a colored swirl spin on the ball, and being colorblind, that made the game fucking impossible for me to play at higher levels. I eventually did okay at it, partially through luck, but it was really hard to play that game like properly being colorblind. The Warriors game, I love that they made it. It is one of my favorite things that Rockstar has ever done, because it is Rockstar at its most fucking, like, look at us. Look at what we're going to do next. What the fuck are we going to do next? Oh, you want the next Grand Theft Auto? No. You know what we love? The fucking Warriors. You know what's a huge inspiration to us? The fucking Warriors. we're going to make a goddamn video game based on the fucking Warriors because who's going to tell us no? And it's not like the Warriors is not an amazing video game. Like, it's got issues, right? But it's fucking cool. And also, you know what's cool? The Warriors, the movie. And so the idea that all these years later, they said, man, the Warriors, hey, you know what's cool? That was Rockstar at its most like, we're going to try and tell the kids what's cool because they don't know anymore. Because they're like losing track of it. They're losing track of the cool older shit. And they said, we're going to fucking introduce a whole new generation to the hit film, The fucking Warriors. And it's still a great movie. But the game, yeah, I don't know. I was not. I really wanted to like the game. I remember being told, hey, guess what we're working on next. I remember someone kind of pulling me aside and be like, hey, here's what we're doing. We're making a game based on the Warriors. I was like, oh, you motherfucker. Like, oh, God. I could not believe it. It was so perfect. Just conceptually, the idea of like, we're going to make a game based on the Warriors. Because the Warriors, the movie, is a video game already. It is structured appropriately like a game. It's that was when Rockstar still went to E3. I remember they had a booth space that was a tour bus with a chain link fence around it. And I remember getting on the bus. I remember going and getting on the bus and sitting down, and they had a TV, or in the whatever, the bus had a TV in it already mounted into it. And I remember seeing the trailer for the Warriors and talking to them about what they were doing with the Warriors. And yeah, like I said, the final product is not maybe as good as it could have been. But that is, if I had to pick a time when I was maybe like, that I would say I was jealous of people making video games, it was when the people at Rockstar were able to say, fuck you, we're making a game based on the Warriors. Because like, it's just, here's this old movie that no one really talks about anymore. And like and you're like, wow, fuck. Wow. Wow, you guys. You're really throwing it around now, aren't you? Such a fucking cool thing. But not the best game that they ever made. It's probably San Andreas. And that's, again, like there's stuff about San Andreas that is terrible. Like I feel like the GTA games, the shooting in them has gotten better with every single iteration of it, to the point where it's not fun to go back and play GTA 3. Or even Vice City in some ways because of the way the shooting was in those games. And so like stuff about San Andreas like sort of sucks by even the shooter standards of the day. It was not like amazing, but because the shooting felt better than Vice City, it was still very easy to be like, yeah, fuck, awesome. There are checkpoints in there that are annoying, and like this is annoying shit in San Andreas. I don't mean to say it's like the perfect video game or whatever, because in some ways GTA 5 is a significantly better game. But yeah, San Andreas is like such a weirdly complete package. That you look at the things they did from GTA 3 to GTA San Andreas, it seems impossible that those games run on the same basic technology or whatever, like that they were able to do all of this by iterating on GTA 3 and then Vice City is nuts. But they were just, you get the impression they were just very creative with how they were using that technology and how the things they could push that engine to do. And when you've got a management team that is like yelling at you in 72-point emails every day and fucking like working you to the goddamn bone, it's amazing what you can accomplish, right? Ugh. But yeah, San Andreas is probably the right answer there. Cody from North Carolina asks, have we reached the limit of current controllers? I just recently started and beat Elden Ring as the excitement for the DLC started up, and I greatly enjoyed my experience. However, one thing that I had to fight with was the proper use of the controls when dealing with switching weapons and items on the fly during combat. It really feels like the amount of things that From Software wants the player to be able to do and what the standard controller layout is stretching the limits for what these controllers can reasonably accomplish. I used a standard Xbox One controller for most of my playtime, but I tried my 8BitDo Pro controller with back buttons and macroed them to auto-scroll my items, which helps so I don't have to move my thumbs from the sticks while in combat. When will the console manufacturers nut up and innovate on the gamepad and make it standard? So, yeah, yes, there are a lot of weird, like, you know, like the shoulder buttons as shift button, right? Where it's like, okay, these buttons do this, but then when I'm holding down RB, they become my 4 abilities. But normally it's jump and reload and all this, and, you know, no one really uses L3 and R3 as much as they could. And, so I agree with you that today's controllers are being used in so many different ways that, like, is really hard for people who don't play a lot of video games already. You know, this is something that, you know, if you're used to it, you're used to it. But if you're not used to it, that stuff's really difficult, you know, to wrap your mind around. But, you know, it's not an unclimbable hill of like, oh, the D-pad does this. I mean, you could argue that, like, and I would argue against this as a player of fighting games, but, like, I think you could do some simple stuff like get rid of the D-pad and just put 4 more buttons over there. Because so many games just use the D-pad as another set of buttons anyway, that is more standard than movement in games. This would be a terrible thing for fighting games and for indie 2D platformers and for all of that other stuff, right? That would be a hellish development. Joy-Cons already kind of do this, but unfortunately, there are still too many games that Nintendo specifically makes that use that for movement. But I'm surprised that there's no third-party controller that really does that just turns that into buttons. But something that was hot swappable, you could do that, but that gets more expensive, and you don't want your pack-in controller to be this, like, customizable weird thing. But I am surprised that, like, you know, the Xbox Elite controller, for all of its replaceable D-pad stuff, that it doesn't just have one that's just, here's 4 buttons. For how often games use the D-pad as another set of buttons. I also think that this touchpad that PlayStation has been sticking to for the past 2 generations is a gigantic waste of fucking time. What uses that for anything other than, if you push the left side of it, it's like the same as if you hit the select button, and if you push the right side of it, it's like you hit the start button. It's a waste. You could put a fucking keypad there. You could fucking go straight Jaguar on that ass. You could go fucking straight up in television on that ass and just put some fucking, like, you could put 12 buttons right there if you really wanted to. If you really wanted to be a disgusting, sick fuck. But I don't know, like, what games would use that and how would they use it? Like, what if you had all kinds of shortcuts for inventory and stuff? And then it'd be even more buttons for players to learn. That's kind of the problem you run into there, is like, you could do that. And like, what if, let's say you had a, you know, oh, this game doesn't have a subscreen. Why? Because I can just select which subscreen item I want here, pushing 1 for boomerang, 2 for bombs, 3 for the bow and arrow. You know, like, you could do that. But then that's even more crazy than, you know, like, stopping the action, going to a subscreen, letting players select an item in a reasonable pace and an understandable pace, as opposed to having to memorize a set of 9 buttons, 12 buttons, whatever, for every single game that they play. So that's ultimately that's why that stuff doesn't happen, right? Is I think that they've probably done the math, and I'm sure that they've done a lot of research. When you look at the research facilities these companies have built around controllers, you have to imagine that they've done the work of going like, okay, well, what if we put more buttons on it? And seeing the number of casual players that just get lost at that point, because today's controllers probably already have too many buttons on them. But also, like, I don't need the fucking pad. Like, what? No games use it as an actual, like, so few games use it as like an analog surface, and instead it just becomes like 2 more buttons on your controller that just duplicate the functionality of a good start and select button. So yeah, I don't know, like I don't know what people are doing with the pad. Like, I would take the pad off. I would consider putting maybe 2 more buttons on the back, maybe not 4. But, you know, if you put 2 more, if you put 2 back buttons, maybe that would be something that over the course of a generation people would get used to. Maybe. Put 2 more buttons on the face. So we can have, you know, fighting game stuff, finally. But it's hard to make adjustments to that controller without losing functionality in another genre of game. I think the share button is fucking cooked. I like, who cares, man? Does anyone ever use that fucking thing? Are you like, oh, I've got to save a screenshot of this? Like, I'm in the business of taking fucking video of games, and I don't use any of that bullshit. So I would ditch that in favor of a proper select button. I would ditch the touchpad in favor of something else. And I would put 6 buttons on the face and see how that goes. But again, I have to imagine that the more buttons you put on a controller, the more things you put on a controller like that, that you lose more and more of the casual audience, and that they've done the math on that and they've done the research on that. They've said as much. You know, it's that feeling of like, man, today's controllers are intensely complicated for players who have not grown up getting used to controllers. You know, we all think of it as very standard because the controllers are all basically the same. But already the idea of like, you can click in the sticks and those are buttons and you can do this and these are analog and these ones are not. And this, you know, like it's a hard hill to climb if you're not already familiar with games. And, you know, they've got us one way or the other. It doesn't matter what they do. So, of course, they're going to skew in favor of, like, what are the things we can do to help get more players through the door. And it's not, and it's in some ways that the answer to that is don't change a thing. Because we've had this standard of controller now for a few generations, and people are probably just getting used to it. But I agree, man. Like, you know, like I got to hold down LB and then I got to push left and right on the D-pad to cycle through this. And if I hold RB and push left and right on the D-pad, it cycles through this, and then I can do this. Like, that's too much for me in a lot of games. You eventually can get used to anything, but like, you know, that a lot of times that's like, I look at that and just like, I don't, like, whatever, man. I will just hit pause and go to the menu and do it. Let's take like one more here. Jake in Ann Arbor writes in and says, you're now in charge of Xbox. What do you do? I'll shorten this. If you were given the reins to run Xbox today, taking the Microsoft Games CEO position from Phil Spencer, what would you do? What would you do short-term and long-term to ensure profitability and growth? What would be your goals for Xbox as a brand? Would you consider leaving hardware? Do you team up with Nintendo even further? I think it's you I think right now, and I would not be shocked if this is what they were doing, but when we look at things like they've pulled, the reports that they've pulled back in Europe on some of the marketing and some of the other stuff for the current Xbox, you can't just bail on this console. It's just not how it works anymore. But doing stuff like that and saying like, hey, we're not going to market the shit out of it. Like the die is kind of cast here. People chose PlayStation, especially in Europe. I would be focusing 90% of my attention on the next generation right now. If you're really going to make another attempt at hardware, I would be figuring out what I can do to fucking bomb first and beat Sony to market, if possible. I would be figuring out what you can do to get developers excited about working on your console. I would make sure that my internal studios are aligned. And this is all easier said than done, right? And I'm sure that they're doing all this, and sometimes shit goes wrong, But it's that feeling of like, okay, we've got to make sure that our internal studios are lined up behind this new device. So like we need to get to a point where this new console comes out and there's no more excuses. Games just fucking come out and they are at least good, if not amazing. And then, whatever we do with Game Pass, whatever we do with, like all that sort of stuff to kind of support the first party releases from underneath. But yeah, I don't know that I would change that much. I think that the things they're doing with third party in terms of bringing games to PlayStation, I think a lot of that makes sense. But again, like I don't have access to the books. So you have to look at what are they doing that's definitely not working. Selling the console in Europe, I think is a pretty clear, that's never really worked for them. Selling it in Japan is not even a thing. But it's not even selling in the US. So what do you do to get people behind it again? I don't know. I think you take one last high profile stab at it. I think if you're really going to have the most powerful console ever next time around, and try to make one more expensive stab at it and not just like go off into Cloudland and whatever else, then I would that's where you draw the line. That's where you build the fire break. That's where you're like, okay, right here, this is where we make our stand. And this is where we put all our best efforts here on this date forward. We are building for the next console. We are doing everything we can to make this happen. This generation is on life support. We'll do what we can. We'll support it as best we can. But really, what we're doing is we're going to try to beat Sony to market. We're going to try to have we're going to try to get back out there next time around and really make the most of this Activision acquisition, what that means for Game Pass, whatever. But also you've got to push on like 5 different fronts, right? And so in some ways, the console can never be as popular as you want it to be if you're thinking about this bygone era of the Xbox 360, because you're still married to this idea of games coming out on PC. You're still married to this idea of gaming in the cloud. And so those are consumers that are not going to buy your console. And so you kind of make that best effort that you can because you want to get the console players excited, because everything still kind of flows from that, it seems. But at the end of the day, if Sony outsells you, that's fine, as long as you're still making money on all those other products. The catch is they don't always make money on PC because all those players go to Steam. Valve gets that 30% instead of Microsoft. So I don't know. You could spend a bunch of time trying to rebuild the PC games experience on Windows to make that friendlier, to make that store friendlier, and see if you could pull some people away from Steam. But realistically, you still have to put your games on Steam. If you want to make your numbers, you probably need to be selling them there as well. So yeah, I don't know. I would probably look at partnerships with Steam where appropriate. And, that probably triggers a bunch of antitrust shit as well on the monopoly front, but I would at least think about something there. But again, I bet they've been down most of these roads. Like, nothing I'm saying is, I'm sure no one at Microsoft is going to hear this and be like, oh, what the fuck? What? We got to get this guy on the phone, like whatever. I don't think that, I don't think that what they're doing is too far off. I think that they're just, in a lot of cases, the quality of the games has not been what it needs to be. And also, I think that the expectations of the audience writing questions like this and, involved in the, like, who's better, Sony or Microsoft, they're fighting a fight that doesn't exist anymore. And so if we're realistic about our chances in the console space, we have to also build in that we are selling these games on PC, that these games are coming to Game Pass, that these games may exist on streaming services that people are subscribing to, and that our money has been diversified that way. And so we have to be okay with having a second place or third place console as long as the numbers work for us. And I think that's what they've been doing. I just don't know if the numbers are actually working for them or not. It's hard to say. They don't seem like they're on fire. They don't seem like they're like, oh my God, what do we got to do? They don't seem like they're moving at a pace that's like, hey, this is all hands on deck. We've got a fucking emergency over here. This seems like that they've got a plan in place. It's not a super popular plan because it involves raising prices and some of this other shit. But they at least seem like, once again, that they've got something that resembles a short-term plan in place that gives them some pivots and gives them some wiggle room. If things work better than they anticipated or worse than they anticipated, they can kind of make some changes. But I think at the end of the day, the market has changed. And so the idea of taking, of putting all your eggs into a basket around a console rather, is a very old way of looking at it. And I think that everyone in the console space knows that. And I think that they are all going to address it in their own different ways. I think Sony will have a very PlayStation-like solution for some of these issues. You see them limping into the PC. You see them doing it, You see them getting more games on PC, and that's something that will only increase in the future. And I think that there are ways for them to get their games in front of more people as well. My point is, I think everyone has the same problem. I think Microsoft is just having that problem in a much more visible way. Because they talk more in some ways, like they, and because they've had to lay things off, and because they've had more games coming out that are not good. They've had their Redfalls. They've had, they've had this stuff where they've had to answer for it, and Sony hasn't. Instead, Sony has not much of anything. We'll see how Concord does. But their numbers, at least the visible numbers we saw on Steam during that beta, which was open to everyone who wanted to play it, weren't exactly amazing. Of course, you could argue that 90% of the player base for Concord is probably playing on a PlayStation and not on PC, and maybe that's right. I don't know. But yeah, I don't think anything I would do would be a dramatic shift. I don't necessarily think that they're like way out of whack. I think that they just, like, in some cases, like, I would take a really long and hard look at the first party ecosystem and just go like, what the fuck is happening here? Because these games are not coming out the way they need to come out. What do we need to do to fix that? Like, what do we need to do? Do we need to push things back again? Like, like, what's the hit we need to take to make sure that these games on day one are quality, are not broken, are not suffering from technical issues, and are straight up good ass games. Not everyone's going to be a big hit, but they've had a run of like stuff that you just look at and go like, eh. They've had a run of like pretty forgettable games over the past few years here. And I don't, so I would take a long, hard look at that and go like, this is the thing that, like, this is sort of the thing that carries the service. Like, if we're out here saying day one games are on this tier of service, our day one games need to be fucking good and more frequent than they are as well. So I would, that's the part that I would probably spend the most time focusing in on. And then depending on how that's doing and what it takes to get it where it needs to go, you allocate funds to the Game Pass people accordingly, which I think is how they've been doing it too. It's like, oh, these games are coming in late. Okay, here's more. Go get us some Game Pass exclusives. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. And they did that for a good long time. Yeah, I don't know. It's a hard problem to solve. It's not something that It's not something that some fucking moron on a podcast is going to spit out the exact answer. I don't care who you are. Because I think it's like they've found themselves in a very complicated spot. That's going to do it for the show. I'm going to get going. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks to my audio stuff for magically fixing itself somewhere over the course of the show somehow. I don't know why or how that happened, but good. Otherwise, I was going to have to spend an hour like staring at Windows settings and going, why is this only coming out of the left channel? What button did my daughter hit this morning to break it all? Anyway, I will be back with you for the podcast next Tuesday, but I will also be here Wednesday morning to, I don't know, we'll play some games. I don't know what we will play. I've got a couple of things installed that are not out yet that I don't think I can do anything with, but I will look and see and we'll figure something out. 3 hours of Warframe, baby. No, I don't know. Yeah, coming back tomorrow, we'll play some games. Coming back next Tuesday for the podcast. And of course, on Friday, we'll play some 8-bit Nintendo games. Also, Friday morning, I'm going to finally go see a doctor about this weird cough I've had for the past 3 months. I'll get an inhaler for that, I think is usually how it goes when this cough surfaces. I have to go get an inhaler. So, that'll be fun. Anyway, I'll see you then. Have a good one.